If you want, I've already hit it. So whenever y'all are ready, I'll just turn our audio back up. Yeah, I'm adding a little bit each week. I don't know if
the season of the Mandalorian, it will be a real live stream.
Yeah.
And then it'll be too late. What the fuck is it? Look, okay, yeah. So the reason every writer you've ever met in your entire fucking life will tell you how good Friday Night Lights is it's like a masterclass in dramatic tension and how do you create like character drama. So like basically at its very core, it is a show about a high school football coach and his wife and their relationship. But it's also a show about all the different characters involved and their different wants and needs competing with each other. And it's not just that it's high school football in Dillon, Texas. And so there's all this like political pressure for like, oh, well, you know, you should start this quarterback instead of this one. And he's like, well, that's, you know, the boosters want me to do that. Whereas I think the right thing to do is start this person. And the whole inciting incident for the show is that like the star quarterback who's going to take them to state gets paralyzed in like, it's like literally like the opening shot of the show. And suddenly Coach Taylor, who's the main character, his entire season plan is gone. And so he has to start from scratch and try and build this team back up. And how is he going to do that without a star quarterback? And that becomes like the initial drama. And then from there, it just kind of cascades into really interesting places. But like it's fundamentally a family drama about the coach, his wife, and their teenage daughter, and like the dynamics of that and how it percolates upwards and outwards into the systems and political structures of the town and like the football kind of landscape, and then how that cascades back down into like their personal lives. And it's so I finished the finale last night. Like this is like the 5th time I've watched it. I was like, God damn, like this show gets it. It's just so good.
So how does American?
Did they do?
What'd you say, Ray?
5.
They did 5 seasons.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how that show or how American football in general hits you as a foreigner, because even on the inside, like in the deep south where it's like a religion, I'm like, this is too much. I'll gotta chill.
Well, that's kind of a big part of what the story's about, is like that culture and like what does that actually mean. And like it's interesting because I don't give a shit about the sports part of it, but because it's a sports drama, so it finds a way to dramatize the sport without making you care necessarily about the technical aspects or the, you know, I'm saying, like it's more about the drama of it than necessarily the sport itself.
Gotcha.
Speaking of drama and sports, y'all seen any of the Wrexham stuff?
The what?
Right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Welcome to Wrexham. So what's his name? Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, the guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They got together and they bought the oldest or the 3rd oldest football club in the UK.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was a year or 2 ago they bought them, and last year they missed out on getting promoted into the actual football leagues by like 1 game. And then they were up against the other top tier team in the current league last week, and it like went down to like a final penalty which they blocked, and it was soccer is never going to work in this country, but it was very dramatic.
Yeah.
Well,
Actually,
football with a U is Australian football is very interesting, but like football with a U is never going to work in this country, because not until like they get rid of the goalie and make the goal like 2 times bigger.
Yeah, and like they somehow add a way for it to be even more of a contact sport.
Yeah. Everyone carries around bats or bludgeons.
Well, I mean, if you look at baseball, Americans don't need there to be. It doesn't need to be a contact sport. There just needs to be stuff happening. Like the rules that baseball
is threatening. Like there's a bullet traveling through the air half the time. Like
but baseball gets it. Like, have you heard of the changes that they made this year?
I've heard of some of them.
Like they instituted a bunch of rule changes that like all the diehard baseball people are like, oh, it's gonna ruin the sport. But like they made all the bases bigger. They put in a pitch clock. They put in very specific rules on how many times the batter can step out of the box, and like how long the pitcher has to throw the ball, etc. So that and like I said, they made the bases bigger, and they did put some other rule changes in there too, so that there is more action in less time. Because like they looked at the patterns of games, and like the length of games, not exponentially is not the right word, but like the length of baseball games has been growing steadily for like the past 10 or 15 years. It's like I think last year it was an hour or an hour and a half longer than it had been back around 2000. It was getting really excessive, and it's just like, no, we can't have that. Like, network TV isn't going to take that. People aren't going to these games because they're like 4 hours long or 5 hours long. Ain't nobody got time for that. So now there's more action in less time, and it's actually like really good.
See, that's interesting. I feel like sports is one of those things, like, because I mean, the sports that we have here, it's all timed, right? So it's all like, except with the exception of cricket. And what they've done with cricket, which I think is genius, is there's 2 versions of cricket now. There's Test cricket, which goes over like 3 to 5 days, depending on the game. And then there's 2020, which is 20 innings for each team, and whoever scores the most wins. And so if you want to watch the boring, slow cricket, you can. You don't usually watch it. Just put it on in the background in your house for like a week. That's basically how Test cricket works. Or 2020, where it's like 20 innings, and it's everyone trying to hit it out of the stadium every single time they get the ball, and it's fucking excellent. And so like it's been dubbed like speed cricket here, where it's like the fast, exciting version. It's like the sexy version, and then the old people, the fuddy-duddies, still have the previous versions. They can't get mad, you know.
See, I just want like Blurns Ball from Futurama or something that is just so outlandish, and we don't have a future sport, and that
basketball.
Something. I mean,
you gotta watch Australian football because it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Speaking of homework in movies, have you all seen Basketball?
No, what are you talking about?
It's Basketball. It's made by the South Park guys. It was one of my favorite movies when I was in high school. I watched the shit out of that. I watched that a ton.
Oh, it's actually starring Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Okay. Yeah. What? That's bizarre. Okay. Basketball is a 1998 American sports comedy film co-written and directed by David Zucker and starring Trey Parker and Matt Stone, along with Diaz Mableeth, Jenny McCarthy, Robert Vaughn, Ernest Borgnine, and Diane Butcher. I fucking haven't heard some of those names in years. Deanne, not Diane. I always get that wrong. So, I have heard of this, actually. Interesting. Well, the more you know.
I'm not necessarily going to assign that as homework, but like if you haven't seen it, I'd put that on your list for a Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah, that's a okay.
And getting us on the Star Wars track in regards to homework, I think I need to exclude myself from all homework for the next 100 hours because that's what it's going to take for me to get through all this stuff. I'm doing so good. I'm in season 3 of Clone Wars now, so I've started the whole like Mandalore arc, and I've got a bunch more backstory that, like I said in the chat, just confused the stew out of me.
I'm not surprised. It's a weird time to be consuming that content parallel because for me and Rye, it's been in our brains for like 7 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But it must be so immediate, and you're like, wait, Bo-Katan did what?
Yeah. And like, it's ironic. I did the exact same thing with Harry Potter. Like, I was not a fan of the franchise whatsoever until Deathly Hallows, the book, was about to be released. So I read all 6 novels in the weeks leading up to the 7th book coming out because my whole friend group was, huge fans. They're literally their whole lives growing up. And then I went to the release at Books A Million. They had like a midnight release for the novel, and all of the nerds are standing out there at midnight to get this book. And then we all went and jumped in our cars and we're like sitting there reading at 1 a.m. in the morning, all reading these books.
I didn't go that far, but my experience was pretty much the same. Where I started a new job, and it was at a small company. It was just me and 2 other guys, and they were both super into they were so jazzed about like the new last Harry Potter book coming out, and so that infected me, and I had to go read them. I read Order of the Phoenix in a day. It was a very long day.
Yeah,
it was like 18 hours start to finish. But
there's something that happens with that franchise. We could talk about Harry Potter for literally an entire year. There's something really interesting with that. So like I think it's the Goblet of Fire is the real turning point for the genre of those stories, and I think that last book is so interesting because it was such a phenomenon. I mean, you guys know like the paratextual stuff around it, right? So it was like this huge phenomenon, basically like by way of Warner Brothers through her publisher, they basically were pressuring Joe and being like, "Hey, you need to finish this because we need to start pre-production for the final set of films. So you need to finish writing this thing because you're holding up the production of this multi-quillion dollar franchise by not finishing this fucking book."
Maybe something HBO should have done.
Potentially. Potentially. And you can feel... I mean, the AMC should have done it with The Walking Dead as well. We can't get into it. But you can feel that last book. Reading it, it feels like a scramble to tie up all these loose ends. Like it just has this like scrappiness and like a lack of polish to it. And I remember saying that at the time, in my would have been like first or second year of my writing degree. And if you ever wanted to like ostracize yourself from a group of people faster,
criticize Harry Potter.
There is no other way than walking into a room of writers and criticizing Harry Potter. People were like. They were mad at me. Like they weren't just like they were like upset.
You go to hell.
Like,
you go to hell. You die.
Yeah, like well, they're Australian, so they went, "Oh, fuck off, mate." Like, but you know, it was brutal. And like I remember being like, "But it's not good," and it didn't matter to anyone because it was such a, like Darth said, such an important part of like their personality and growing up. And that's kind of like the closest I have interfaced with the Star Wars attachment. Like there's similar kinds of like you stake a large part of your personality in a series of stories and then you're pissed off when they're bad or they're not the stories you want to see. And it's like someone coming in and being like, "Hey, that's maybe not a great way to live." And you're like, "No, fuck you." I refuse to change. You're an idiot. And that was a there's very few things I would change about my life going back, but that's one of them.
It's interesting because you see that same thing in the Star Wars franchise. Like we tend to focus on the fans that are disgruntled because their voices are a lot louder. But you have the people exactly like you described that it doesn't matter how bad the content is, they will still rave about it and they will put down anyone that says anything negative about it because it's something they grew up with and identify with and all this stuff. And it's just interesting to think that we have people on both sides of the fence that are so hardcore that either everything is wrong or everything is always right, and it is so hard to find people in between. Like I was arguing with someone in one of the comments of my videos that I'm not a hater of the sequel trilogy, which is such a difficult conversation because like the haters, as a like proper term, like will not say anything good about it ever. They define like their entire existence about hating these films. Whereas I feel like I'm more like critiquing them, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. So there are basically two modes of engagement with text writ large. I mean, we talked about this a lot in Sherlock, but the one that you're describing is you're approaching it and engaging with it as a body of text and as a critic, right? So you're looking at it saying, what in here is working? What in here am I interested in? And then there's people who are approaching a text and using it as and not consciously, right? When I talk about this stuff, I don't mean that they're actively sitting down and planning this. What they're doing is they are using the text as a means by which to construct a social. And by that, I mean, because the social is predicated on its exclusions, they say, well, I belong to this kind of community, and this kind of community believes X, Y, Z. And so if you don't believe X, Y, Z, you are excluded from the community, which is how we define our social. Right, that's like, me and all my homies hate Donald Trump. Right, that's a way of like defining the social by its exclusions. It's just a mechanism by which people for generations and decades have been creating social groups and social norms, and it's just one of those like really hard to unpack things because it gets masked in so many layers of like, we have this opinion and that opinion and this, and then you try and tackle one of them, and then suddenly they hit you with like 5 other things, and then they suddenly have all these labels they're using. You have to work out the fuck they're talking about. It's a difficult thing to unpack. But that's generally where that comes from, is the two different modes where someone's trying to define the social versus someone's trying to like describe a text and talk about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of the last Harry Potter book being not good, do you remember in my video about The Last Jedi, I did reference Deathly Hallows in that when I was talking about third-party interventions.
Yes, and the third-party intervention in that is
they get the Horcrux, but they don't know what to do. They don't know how to destroy it, and then they basically just hang out in the woods until
the sword turns up.
Until the sword turns up.
Yeah. That's right. Yes, I remember specifically
and
I
then
thought that was a weird adaptation thing.
The fire killing the tiara as well. It was like Malfoy or whoever it was decided to use the one curse that was capable of destroying a Horcrux at the only time that it could possibly destroy a Horcrux. And then I think there was another one, but yeah, there were multiples.
Well, that one works better because the story hasn't ground to a halt. Whereas, like when they're in the woods, it's still an intervention, as you say, but it's less noticeable because the story just stops in the woods. It's just that was noticeable in the book too, but it's really obvious in the movie. Where just nothing happens and we're just waiting, and it was like I also said with what was the other one that I referenced? It was Age of Ultron, where they have to wait for Fury to show up. I mean, like some important stuff happens while they're out there at the farm in Age of Ultron, but it's the same sort of situation where they're just waiting.
I think it works differently because they're functionally trying to do the same thing, right? Which is they want to have the scene where the heroes are sidelined for a bit and they have to work on some interpersonal drama before they can get out there and get back into the main story. I think where the Civil War stuff works better is they try and pull on those threads a little more aggressively. Like there's because there are more characters, there are more conflicts and drama to be had in that lull. And like you get the three kind of axioms of that drama, right? You have Captain America and Steve Rogers kind of quibbling over who's in charge. You have Bruce Banner and Scarlett Johansson's character and their relationship. And then you kind of have everyone else trying to work out how they should be interfacing with this, and then Fury turns, and then the Hawkeye's family is kind of like the people have to try and interface with all of these dramas. Whereas I think with the Harry Potter thing, it's so transparent that the only drama to be had is A, they're being chased, but they're kind of ostensibly protected through this magic barrier, and B, it's the love triangle, which we know isn't a love triangle because we know that Harry and Hermione are just friends, and so that tension feels like artificial in a lot of ways, and it feels and that's why it feels like it grinds to such a halt. Is it's like, okay, we've stopped, but I know where this is going. Like it's just a misunderstanding. Let's get on with it. Like it has that sense of feeling constructed to me.
That's my same argument with Civil War in Marvel that they did the movie on. Was the whole entire time I'm like, eventually y'all are going to sit down and talk this out. Can we just get past all of the cool action stuff? Because as far as the story goes, it's all pointless.
Yeah, but they punched for
Civil War,
and they were mates. But Civil War, isn't the whole conflict there? I mean, isn't the real conflict of that film the realization or the lie that we're all unaware of, which is that Winter Soldier killed Tony's dad? That's like the real plot of that's the story.
I think that's completely irrelevant.
I remember Civil War now. No, that one I had a big problem with just because of the premise of the whole thing. It's one of like you remember how I like to talk about, I really want a character to say something or characters to say something, and then they don't most of the time. And this is one of those situations in Civil War where they're like, well, you guys, you did Sokovia and like you blew up this apartment building somewhere while you were chasing the bad guys from wherever the bad guys are from, and Hydra, and then you wrecked like New York and everything. And it was like, all right, so this apartment building in Sokovia, like that's legitimately our bad, but you guys were gonna drop a nuke on New York. Like that's not on us. Like you guys, that would have happened without us. So like, what are you talking about? No, I had
what's your argument here?
I had a big problem with the premise of that movie.
I don't disagree. I think it is a similar kind of issue where like if the premise isn't sufficiently I always hate using the word engaging in this context. If the premise isn't sufficient, if you don't feel like the premise has urgency and weight to it, then yeah, it does make a lot of the rest of it very challenging to like for you to give a shit about. Lots of stuff that you like. I mean, you could have like a fairly spurious story that's supposed to just be fun and like you have good character drama or something. But I think it so much depends on what the story is trying to pitch itself as. Like Civil War wants to be about these things. Like it sets out and goes, this is about whether or not what these guys do is the right thing and whether they should be regulated.
Yeah.
And because it's a story set in America, the conclusion is no, we shouldn't regulate it. And whether or not you believe in that is an entirely different issue than what the film believes, which is no. Individual exceptionalism is the only path forward. Play the Star Spangled Banner. But I guess miracle. Writ large, I think though, I completely agree, and I think it's just like there are we've talked about this before. There are stories where you watch it and you go, this just isn't for me, but I appreciate what it's doing. And then there are stories where you watch it and you go, this is supposed to be for me, and it's really not working. And I think Civil War is one of those films where like if you wrote down a premise for a film and slipped it across the table to me, and I picked it up and it said superhero film that's ostensibly about the interaction of politic with the individual and their ability to exercise their will and their powers, I'd be like, here is my check for several $1 million, Marvel, please make it. Like it's a film on paper that I should have loved, and I haven't thought about it since I watched it. Like, I'm like, that's kind of, that's really not a good sign.
At some point down the road, we should talk about those movies, because like Civil War is actually one that like if I had to put them like all on a top 10 list, or from what I like the most to the least, Civil War would be on the higher end, I think. Yeah. Ultron I did not like. I've seen that a couple times now, but something that you said,
Ultron.
something that you said a minute ago in I think regards to the Harry Potter, where you said I think you used the word constructed. Stick a pin in that, because we're going to be coming back to that when we talk about Mando.
Oh yeah.
So, do we have anything else? Yeah. Speaking of Mando,
before we get to Mando, the only other thing I was going to say is we did some years ago, before Endgame came out, me and two of my co-hosts from my old show, we rewatched every Marvel film in publication order, and we did like 3 a week, and it made me want to die. But we did, and it's those are still up on Patreon, I think, and they are some of the most interesting discussions, because when you watch them, and we chunked them kind of like, because they kind of have thematic chunks a little bit. We sort of chunked them together, and it's so funny. There are some episodes where we're just like, you can tell we're trying to burn through it, and then you get to something like Guardians 2 or like Spider-Man Homecoming, and it's just us all being like, man,
you're just really chewing on it.
Just real, like there's a lot of meat on the bones we talk about. It's like, it's all about daddy issues and this, that, and the fifth thing, and like, oh, what about this and that? And then some of it's like, yeah, the Hulk was there. And they punched for a bit, and then they were mates, I guess. Like it's yeah, I think they really run the gambit, but that's to be expected, right? It's a big franchise. But yeah, Guardians 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, like let's go. This film's fucking rip. I guess we could talk about Mando. That's my last non-Mando thought.
All right, segue. Mando Chapter 23, The Spies. So it opens up on the lower levels of Coruscant, where Elliot Kane is meeting an Imperial probe droid, which has a hologram of Moff Gideon, and she's filling him in on stuff. And then cut from there, and he goes and walking through all of those force field blast doors that got Qui-Gon killed. And then he goes in and has and then he goes and has his talk with all of the other Imperial hologram people. So what do y'all have through that? I loved that whole opening scene on Coruscant. It was beautiful. I thought that was such a gorgeous bit of cinematography there.
I liked it until we got to the part where he was walking through the Qui-Gon doors, because I'm just like,
yeah, I hated that. Yeah,
I was looking at that. I'm like,
why? Like, what's the purpose?
Why are there guards? What are those like suits of armor that are like hung up on the wall? I mean, they're not, but like it would make sense that they were sort of decorative. But like, what are they guarding when you've got these laser doors that they're surrounded by? Like, what if one of them has to like, where do they poop? Like, what if one of them has to take a break? You know,
who's doing maintenance on the laser doors?
Yeah, what are they doing there? Like, it was I don't know. That kind of stuff jumps out at me, and like I thought it was really stupid.
Yeah, there's some stuff that you could just see that whoever in charge was like, let's do this because of this visual image in my head, and they're like, it would be really cool for him to go and walk through all of these doors, and they're just opening in front of him, and the laser sounds and the guards, and then when you actually sit and think about it, and you're like, what are they guarding? Why are the doors there?
It's like with
innocent baby boys. You don't see what they're doing? You don't think we're gonna get a lightsaber duel there at the end of the season?
Yeah, but why are the guards there? That's what I'm talking about. It's not the laser doors. The laser doors are fine. It's why are the guards there? Because like, it's
what are they guarding?
It's just like and it's just like it's something out of Family Guy where it's like where the two guys of the Death Star are like, why is there no railing? It's like, well, I asked for a railing, but they said that we'd be leaning. You know.
You know what's funny is the doors were also like motion activated because they just went up when he walked close to them. So
or there's a guy that you can't see
that's pushing them.
Yeah.
Like, door 3, go. Door 2, go.
His phone rings and Moff Gideon's just like standing there waiting. He's like, "Sorry, it's my wife. She's in labor." He's like, "Just open the door, bro." Like,
that'd be a really funny parody of like some security guy that's watching all these cameras and he's the one who physically has to open every door that they walk through in every movie, and nothing's actually motion activated. It's just one poor dude up at a console.
I don't think there is anything motion activated in Star Wars.
All of the doors open when they get close to him.
It has to be. I mean, we have that technology.
Kmart has that technology. The Death Star's got to have it. No, I agree. I thought it was a little. It was
goofy,
cool, but goofy as fuck. This whole episode is the goofiest thing I've seen in a long time in Star Wars.
Some of that stuff I was. It's weird to say that like it was not good, but I was all about it. Like I adored this episode for a lot of reasons, even though there was so much stupid all over the place. I loved the like thematically, I guess. I loved the meeting of the Shadow Council there. We saw Pelion on screen, who was he may be in like Clone Wars or Rebels, but he was a huge part of the Thrawn like novels. Like he was the main Imperial commander that Thrawn worked with. So as soon as they said his name, I was like bouncing up and down because he's a huge connection to Thrawn from the books.
Okay.
And then they name dropped.
Also, Hux is dead.
Yeah, they name dropped Hux as well.
Yeah, I still that.
General Hugs.
Didn't make him a ginger, the cowards. Cowards. Dave Filoni, see me after class, you coward. Next time you're gonna put a Hux dad in, make him ginge.
And I thought it was interesting that there was a whole lot of exposition in that scene, but it was kind of delivered in a way that didn't feel like because like at the end of the episode when Gideon gives his whole speech, I was like, that's just classic bad guy exposition for no reason. But this whole thing with all of the different Imperial people talking gave you a really kind of roadmap as to what they've been doing and where all of this is going. They mentioned their different potential plans, like Project Necromancer, I think was what Hux was working on, and then there was what Gideon is working on, which is different from this plan. So there were all of these different plans, and then Pelion is depending on Thrawn to get back. So there were like 3 concurrent plans to possibly retake the galaxy as the new Empire, right? And I thought that was just delivered in a really interesting and effective way.
Yeah, making it kind of a dick swinging contest I thought was clever. Like making anything into an argument is always a good way to give it like charge. It did, and this is just a taste thing for me personally. I did go, okay, you already know this information. Why are you repeating it to each other? But that's just a personal taste thing. It's just I've written so much exposition in my life that like a second pass of this could have, you don't need to drop the Doctor's name. You can tidy up the screws a little bit on this to make it a bit punchier and a bit less like it felt like they said all the proper nouns just to make sure that we understood, which is not something they would normally do if they're having a conversation, I guess. That's my only grievance.
You can see like Paleon there, like, Moff, why are you expositing at me? Like, what is this?
Yeah. He's like, dude, I know. I read.
I
the
sent you the
minutes
memo.
from-"
It's like,
Yeah.
See,
I
part
read
of that
the email, dude.
part of that just felt so natural to me. I was like, this is an inefficient business meeting. This is totally normal. Everyone's just repeating what they sent in the emails.
Darth once again being the most literal man on planet Earth. Well, they said out loud what they emailed me. I thought it was a great meeting. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there being like,
no,
Why are they
he is
reading-
absolutely right. Nobody reads emails.
I do.
You're
Do you
the
work
one.
in a corporate environment? Because I do, and we don't read
Yes.
emails.
I'm the only one that reads email.
It's like right at the beginning of the meeting. It's like, did everybody read the email about this meeting?
Blank
No.
stares. Yeah.
It's just
It's like,
me in
all
the
right, well,
background.
let's take a couple of minutes and like and talk about the state of the galaxy so that the audience knows what we're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, actually, that's a good point. Someone does invariably go, could someone summarize where we're up to for those of us that didn't care enough to read the fucking memo or the meeting agenda? And you're like,
Well, yeah, that's true. They could have been like, welcome to Moff so and so, who we haven't had before. Let's bring them up to speed.
anyway, I'm just, listen. It's
It didn't
good.
bother me. It didn't bother me.
It didn't bother me. It's only as I'm saying it out loud now that I would have tightened the screws a little bit. But it's fun. I like the idea that no one's really in charge. I thought that was kind of clever, and like obviously it's clearing the path for Filoni's big Thrawn film. But like, I liked the idea that they're having this argument, and it's not like I think there's a version of this where one of the plans is like pitched as better or worse, and we go, oh, that's obviously where they're going. Like everyone is doing their own thing, and they're busy, like you said, Darth. They also have their own different agendas and their own sectors. And it's like, well, you're accountable for the shit going on in your house, and this is everyone else's business, and we'll all work it out later. And that's why they haven't come together and taken over again, is they're all very focused on their own sectors, and they haven't worked out that bigger picture yet. I thought that even just the argument they're having staked very clearly, hey, this is why they're still behaving like this, because they don't have a plan yet, and the second that they look like they're organized, they're fucked. Like they'll get stamped out. I thought that was a clever way to like lampshade why they're still underground.
There was another thing that jumped out at me in not a good way on what did they say? It was something like one of the lady moths was like, the people are already getting tired of like the New Republic. It's because of like their excessive regulation, etc. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're talking about the people being tired of regulation.
Fascists.
Yes, and like you're the totalitarian state, like with the ISB and stuff, and you're like, well, the New Republic, it's like they're making us put in wheelchair access ramps. Well, we can't have that. I want to go back to the Empire.
Where they just execute the people that, yeah.
They're making me put in the new smoke alarms up to code. God. And you're like, well, that's pretty good though, right? They're like, can you believe this? Excessive regulation. Meanwhile, they're like, yeah, when we were in charge, you couldn't not be like a white guy. So
from England,
a British man. It's very funny to me.
So that jumped out at me in the wrong way, because I was like, the people, or the argument that they should be making, and this is one of the things on. I don't think you ever did you ever read the Bloodline book about Leia? About her.
Yeah, I got, honestly, I don't think I finished it. I think I got like 3/4 of the way through and just was everything that I've read so far. I've read the novelization of Last Jedi. I read that one, and I thought they were just terribly, terribly written.
So that one is, I think, David, you might like. Well, I should say I did the audio book version of it, which worked out really well, because what I did was I paid attention to all the stuff that had to do with like politics, and there's like a political story, or there's a large political story, and then there's the it's almost kind of like the B plot of this sort of like pirate thing that's going on, and I didn't pay attention to that at all. and that's about half the book. And then, but like the political stuff is like where it gets really interesting. And I don't remember who I was talking to about this, but it's like, it is something that they really should have done. Like if we rolled back the clock like 10 years to, Disney's plan for what they were going to do with the Star Wars IP that they had bought, I think they really should have started with TV and built up an audience in China, which is what they were trying to do with this trilogy, and I think they have to some extent with Mando, etc. But like the politics that they go into in that book is really interesting because it was really interesting to me because it was plausible, and you had this she's talking with this guy who is arguing in favor of the Empire. And he was like, she goes to this party, and like there's these people there who, the well-to-do, who were the well-to-do under the Empire, and they're like, it was the right idea, we just had the wrong emperor. Like that's a quote, and I was like, that's really good, because
that's how it really goes in those conversations, right?
Yeah, because like the New Republic is like really ineffective in their governance, and because they don't want a return, you have this fact about half of the New Republic is against a strong central government because of the Empire. And then the other half of it, they want a strong central government, reminiscent of the Empire, but different, kind of like the Old Republic. And so you have these two political factions that make sense. And that was really interesting to me. And then to have that subset who were like, the Empire, like I said, the Empire was like, it was a good idea, poorly executed. Let's try it again. And they go off and eventually become the First Order. And I was reading that, and I was like, that's a really interesting. You could make a really interesting story out of, or a really interesting sort of timeless story about why people would want that sort of system to be implemented. And they don't do that very well elsewhere in the franchise. There's your dirty word for you. But I thought in that book, I thought they had some very interesting political conversations that I think you would like.
Okay.
If you just sort of excerpted that from the rest of the book. I'm pretty sure it's called Bloodline.
That explains why I hated it so much, because it's exactly the thing David would like.
Yeah.
Just those parts. The rest of it's trash. But like
okay, I'll definitely check it out.
But yeah, it was. I thought it was a very interesting explanation for like where the First Order comes from, because they don't come out of nowhere. Like they exist in the galaxy of prior to the Force Awakens, and they are these group of planets, and they are very prominent planets that are like, well, we don't really like where the New Republic's going. We're going our own way, and we're forming the First Order. So people know about them. The New Republic knows about them.
Interesting. Also, you can tell this is something I would like because Rian Johnson contributed some ideas to the novel. So, I'm gonna love it. I was gonna say too, that's an interesting. I will read that. I'm putting that in my cart right now. The other thing I was gonna say is, on the argument that these guys make, where they're like, oh yeah, the New Republic, it's all too much regulation or whatever. That is also some of the rhetoric you see from the kind of deep right who want to present any kind of liberal, and I don't mean in the political sense, I mean like in the rhetorical sense, any kind of liberal ideology as restriction, where it's like, for example, let's think of something really simple. Maybe don't yell racist slurs at people, right? Something we can all probably agree is bad to do. And they go, well, we should codify that in some way, regulate that in some way. We should stop people embezzling money and avoiding paying tax, because tax is good. It lets us pay for services that people want. And then they go, well, I don't want to pay tax, and I'm a multimillionaire, so why should I pay tax? That's overregulation. And some of these rhetorical devices are kind of similar to that throwaway line of like, oh, people are saying it's too much regulation. And that's probably because I'm being generous to Star Wars here and the Mando franchise. But Filoni has proved he understands this stuff in Clone Wars. That's probably because they're talking to people who are the ultra elite remnants of the Empire who think that any amount of regulation to them personally is overregulation, because in a fascist totalitarian society, if you're in charge, you are unregulated.
True. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of where it,
I think what we as the audience are supposed to infer as well is like the only negative stuff that we've seen so far is Navarro calling for help and the one dude saying, "Oh, we can't help because XYZ, you're not part of the New Republic," and blah blah blah. And like, what else can they point to in this conversation that says, "Oh yeah, everyone hates the New Republic because of their regulations"? Like, that's the only scene that immediately pops into my head. So that scene is supposed to point towards something that the audience would remember, and it just is very ineffective. They should have shown a lot more scenes like that one throughout, not just this season, maybe all the way leading up to it, just showing the New Republic getting tied up in all of this bureaucracy, red tape that they don't need to be, and then all of this stuff with Imperials coming back and all of these planets siding with them would make a whole lot more sense if we actually see what they're claiming is happening. But as of now, we got one half of a scene that shows it.
I'm pretty sure in season 1, or maybe even episode 1, Mando states that the New Republic is a joke.
Yeah.
Well, he's also a bounty hunter. I mean,
generously what they're pointing to is the fact that they couldn't send aid, or they didn't send aid to Navarro because of all of these rules and regulations and shit, which was what they wanted. So I don't it's one of those things that the one example, the large example.
No, remember, it's the Empire chick who's there at the time when he
That's what I'm saying.
Wait, she was like, well, they should have signed the agreement, and what kind of example does it set, right? It wasn't not like a strict rules and regulations thing, but it's well, maybe they should have joined up.
Yeah, but isn't that I'm trying to think about how the show is thinking about itself, right? Which is what does it mean in this context for them to say the people are saying the New Republic has got too many rules and restrictions, and then the thrust of this episode is the Mandalorians come together and are able to save Navarro, which goes against Moff's plans because he didn't think that was possible because Navarro is supposed to be wiped out. I think this episode in particular is trying to tie it all together, and it doesn't. They aren't related, is what I'm agreeing with you. They're all these constituent parts that don't stitch together into anything particularly coherent when it comes to what do you mean by too many regulations? I'm with Darth. I think we either needed to see more examples or just different language. I don't know.
I love when you put the disclaimer, "I'm agreeing with you." It sounds like I'm arguing, but I'm agreeing.
It sounds like I'm arguing, but I agree with you.
So my Star Wars buddy and I, it happens with us all the time. It's usually there has to be a third person there because we'll be going at it, and somebody will jump in and go, "Wait a minute, y'all are both saying the same thing."
Yep. It's just the second I get
animated, no, fuck you.
I'm like, no, fuck you. Yes, but yeah, it's I agree. I think I would have liked to see maybe some different language here, or a different argument.
One other thing I would say about this scene is that this episode, more than any other, made Moff very interesting to me. I thought prior to this, in season, he's in the last episode of season 1, and then a bit of season. Yeah, he's the main antagonist of season 2. But in all of that time, I felt that really the ominousness or the gravitas of his character came from Gus Fring, and it wasn't really anything to do with this character. And whereas now in this episode, it's he became much more interesting to me. And I'm like, he's building up that rep that I wanted to see from the evil bad guy. I don't know. Does that make sense? What I'm talking about there?
Yeah, it does. I mean, yeah, because you could stick him in anything and he'll be an imposing presence. But you see how that goes in Far Cry 6, where unless you do something with him, you're just relying on him being a presence. Whereas this makes me go, oh, this is a political, hate to say it, this is a political actor with complicated motivation who is an intimidating force, not just because of the person playing him, but what he's capable of. he in this meeting, he sidesteps all these dudes and manages to get what he wants without pissing anyone off too much, while also kind of swinging his dick around and proving he's the biggest, guy in the room.
Mhm.
Like, he does all of it effortlessly, and you go, oh shit, like this guy's he's an operator, I like it.
What is this
Cool.
theory that Lewis is talking about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's like half a sentence got left out or something. What is it? It discusses Bo-Katan's storyline.
Well, while Lewis
Bo-Katan's
works on that,
storyline.
where are we in the story?
What's going on with us?
Okay, so all of the admirals finished talking, and Gideon is like shouting for the Empire, and it's all heroic and
Yeah, for the Empire.
yeah, kind of cool. And then it cuts to Navarro, where the Night Owls are already there, and the new
Where
guys.
where they show up with the wicked paint scheme on the
Yeah.
bottom of the ship.
Yo,
That was pretty
they got
dope.
that fresh drip, bro. That ship is cool as fuck. I like little protocol droids like, sir, there's an Empire shuttle, and and Creed's like, well, first of all, it's not a shuttle, it's a light cruiser, and second of all, did you look at it? Because that's those are Mandos. Like, it's very good. I like a shitty protocol droid. That's very fun for me.
I really love
Nervous.
that.
Why are the protocol droids all so nervous?
Yeah. Yeah. I
so afraid.
I was gonna make the argument that when Anakin programmed 3PO, that was his like childhood, nervousness coming out when he programmed the droid. But no, they're all like that, which is just interesting.
It's very good. Yeah.
Okay, so they have this awkward meeting where all of the one clan takes off their helmets, and then all of the other clan is like, well, we got to be friends with you, but we don't like that you're doing that. You're showing some skin.
So good.
Um,
Just the tense, like, yeah, the tense kind of charge between them, I think is great acting from everyone here. Good directing.
so what did you think of Grogu getting his own little tiny Megazord?
I thought that was a very interesting mechanic that they put in there to make him a bit more independent and a bit more mobile, and also to give him a voice. I thought that was an interesting way to do it. I thought it was a weird way to do it.
It was,
but I thought
yeah.
was interesting.
I agree.
I have a
see,
feeling David doesn't
yeah,
like
I can see the hate flowing.
Let the good.
It's
Let
making-
hate flow through you.
Makes me physically uncomfortable to think about.
I was like, yeah, he's
Hey.
basically sitting inside IG-11 right now.
He's sitting in his friend's corpse. Listen.
You're physically uncomfortable right now.
I've been saying this since season 1. I simply would have done Grogu differently. The fact that he can't talk, the fact that he's so non-ambulant, like, just there are so many things about this character that I find so ineffably and inarticulably frustrating. Like, this is solving a problem that you made for yourself by deciding that you wanted to sell a cute kids toy because that was going to get people involved in the show, which it did. It got normies to watch it. But, like, you have to do something with him. And then they were like, well, what do we do with him? I don't know. Well, he can't talk. So what if we put him in a fucking Zord and then he had a yes/no button? Hold on. I literally have one of those. Hold on.
We have them at work too. We have them in work for our group. We've got the no button at work, so when someone's talking too much, you could just reach over and slap the no button.
Yeah, it's like legit. Yes. It just anyway, I found it. I get why they did it. I didn't like it. I thought it was goofy. That's all I'm gonna say on it because I literally have no other opinion than like, no.
So where is the line with something being goofy and something having comedic merit? Because the way that they used him through the rest of the time, especially when he was going and like stealing food, and it's like Mando can't really stop him because he's in a battle droid. Like, there's comedic potential in what they did with him that I really appreciated, even though I agreed with your initial reaction. I was like, this is so goofy. I hate that they're doing that. But then the stuff like the no 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 or yes yes yes, and the way that he uses that to communicate, to stop the fight, to interact with people in a way that we haven't seen before. Everything was really goofy, but utilized in a way that turned out, I think, being much better than I had anticipated at the beginning.
I would agree with that. However, I don't need comedy in my Star Wars. I've been rewatching Andor, and Andor isn't. How do I phrase this? I don't need the show to make jokes for me. I need the characters to make jokes for each other.
That is so beautiful. I love that. That is so descriptive of like what writers think needs to happen. And it's like, oh, it's been too long. We need a joke to get the audience laughing or something. And that's, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in Andor, it's like, Cassian will drop some kind of like sarcastic barb to get another character to smile. And it's like, but it's, and like, that's what I want to see in my stories. I don't need
Spider-Man.
I don't need Spider-Man. No.
I said that like 2 or 3 weeks ago about like the character that's like not taking the situation seriously and like throwing out quips and stuff. That's Spider-Man.
That is Spider-Man.
Or Tom Holland Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think in his third film, they get it right where I think it's also like how much more. It's goofy, but it's a lot more self-serious in its goofiness. I think that, my issue is just I could have done without this. I could have done without. They already solved the mobility issue. He has the little fucking thing he sits in. Like, they already fixed it. I don't know. I would have just completely excised this from my script.
I think it's because they wanted to have him be more action-oriented than if he just sits in his baby cradle the whole time, because then...
He's a baby!
I know.
He's also the only one who could intervene in that situation that comes up later.
Yeah, I thought that was beautiful, the way that they did that.
Couldn't he? But why didn't he just use the Force? Anyway,
yeah,
sorry,
that's what they should have done, because they're not reinforcing the Force enough for his character, which is supposed to be the unique thing about him being a Mandalorian, is he's the first that we know of Jedi Mandalorian. But
speaking of, this is like actually giving Grogu something to do again in this season, but like him and Mando have not had much to do in this season.
But even then, he doesn't really do much. Like during the whole fight at the end, I was really, really hoping and expecting that that he would partake really effectively in the fight with the stormtroopers, but he just hides the whole time. It's like you're literally in a battle droid, like one of the best in the galaxy. And
that's true. It did have a laser on it, didn't it?
I don't. He in season 1. They're like, this is the baddest droid. He's the best murdering bounty hunter droid you ever did see in your GD life. You're not gonna believe how good he is at murder. And then they're like, hey, and Mando's like, I trust this dude. He's lethal. I need to bring him back. And then they're like, okay, we'll turn him into a mech suit for your kid baby friend. And then they do that, and then the kid baby friend takes the most badass, most lethal GD bounty hunter droid you've ever seen in your life and hides.
Well, to be fair, they only gave him 2 joysticks. One goes forward and one goes left and right. So they did.
It's not a fully loaded mech.
He doesn't know he doesn't know the triggers fire yet. He hasn't worked out. There's no tutorial. I just thought it was goofy, and it didn't pull me out of it. Well, sorry, no, let me rephrase. When it first happened, I was like, what the fuck? And then I just kind of got used to it. But yeah.
I thought they dwelled on the fruit thing a bit too long. And that might be what
the
you're
fruit
talking
joke?
About. Yeah,
because they play it 3 times.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what you're supposed to do in comedy, so they may have taken that and just run too far with it.
The rule of 3?
Only do that if it's funny.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was rude.
I'm sorry. That was harsh.
That was rude. I apologize. Oh dear. I'm clearly in a mood this morning. I apologize in advance for any more animation that comes out of me.
Should I be getting?
What all else happens? Yeah, so the man.
I'm trying to think. Should I be getting some coffee or some scotch? It is Saturday.
For sure, it's definitely a scotch vibe. I've woken up with hate in my heart.
All right, where do we go after the fruit?
Okay, so I don't know if I did this out of order or if in my mind this was anyway. So do they go to the planet and then they meet the people and then they have the dinner when Bo talks about giving away the Darksaber? Because that was kind of a pivotal conversation. That's what I have written next, but I don't know if that's the order in which it happened.
She calls for volunteers for like a search party or something.
Okay, so I wrote this out. Yeah, so that she calls for volunteers, then they go to Mandalore, and have the cool like dropping out of the ship down to the planet surface. That was beautiful.
I'm totally about.
Yeah.
I will never get tired of seeing it. Well, I probably would get tired of seeing it, but I do very much enjoy seeing Mandos in action.
It's sick. Very like Halo ODST, which is like one of my favorite games and some of the best books. You love to see it. Big fan.
Which was also just kind of weird, which I think we've talked about in other scenes where they have aerial support and drop everyone out of the ship so they can go walk 50 miles for no reason.
Bruh, they play the intro where they're coming into the planet. I don't fully understand what's going on with Mandalore and like it being poisoned and shit. I'm so confused because they keep playing it off like, oh, we can't land too close. I'm so confused by the physics of what's occurring here.
I know part of it was that they literally couldn't navigate. They didn't know where the forge was.
Oh,
and so they had to go down and explore to find it, which is also confusing because you'd think that there would be like landmarks in some fashion. Everything wasn't utterly destroyed. There were still, remnants of cities and stuff.
Although she was the ruler of Mandalore. Like, why would she?
Yeah.
Shouldn't she know where it is?
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
And especially if the forge is like they say it's literally the most important part of their culture, like then it should be like we have the coordinates tattooed on our arms kind of thing.
Well, like, yeah, she knew how to get to the living waters.
But didn't remember where the forge was.
Yeah.
Did she? No, Din got to the living waters.
Yeah, she did. No. She took him there.
That's right. He knew where the mines were.
I think he knew. Well, I think he knew where it was too because he was they were in the general location.
Right. All to say, like, I'm the fact that we're squinting at this probably suggests that, like, I think that they're trying to be mechanically obtuse for a reason, and I don't fully understand. I just don't think they've worked out what's going on there.
Well, this is one of those the end result is what drove the action because they needed them on the planet's surface so they could meet the ship that was going to come towards them so they could meet the other Mandalorians who had been there the whole time. And if they're in the air the whole time, then it's more difficult for them to meet the land ship. So they have to drop out of their ship and have to be without the ship in order to meet the land ship. So it's stupid, but it
just gave me permanent brain damage. Yes, you're right. I was like, what do you... Yes, no, you're 100% right. Yeah, it's for the plot. It's plot stuff.
All right, as I'm reading Mike's comment here, what did you all think of the land sailboat?
At first, I couldn't figure it out. I was like, is this whole planet ice, or is the whole planet glassed over because it was nuked? Or, like, what is it riding on? And then when I saw, like, the Clone Wars stuff when they go to Mandalore, the whole planet does look, like, utterly flat, except for the huge bulb cities where they live. And I'm like, I don't understand what the surface of the planet is supposed to actually be. So it made sense, like, structurally, I understand how it works, but why they are using a literal sail barge in the future or the past, however you want to look at it.
It's like this is by and large the coolest thing I've ever seen in Star Wars.
It was it was cool, but I was also questioning it.
Dope.
I thought it was cool. Like, so what Mike is saying about we live in a universe with repulsor jet technology, and we're cruising around the planet in a land sailboat. I would make the argument that the reason that they're doing that is because they've been down there for X amount of years, and you have to get. So not only do you have to go with a low-tech solution that is less likely to break, or less technologically something that you have to keep up with, but also lower tech would be less visible to anybody who's looking. That'd be the argument that I would make for them. Also, it was cool.
It's cool, but there are these big creatures around and stuff, and it's the quietest way to get around without disrupting those big creatures.
I got a thing about that.
Okay, before we move on, one thing I really quickly wanted to say is this is the type of shit that I'm here for. And I realize that it's the kind of thing that Star Wars fans maybe don't love because then it's like, well, now we need some explanations for what's going on. But it's it's a bunch of people who've been here for a while who have worked out a mechanism by which to get around and survive that makes sense for the place they're in. I agree with Darth. What's the surface? Don't know. But if this feels like this group of people and this vehicle feel like they've been around for a number of years, and it just feels like it all makes sense within like what's all happening. And so like when we talk about like, well, how would this get a bunch of people across the planet? Well, we see that happen. How does it work? Well, it's like a steampunk sail barge type thing. Like it all kind of self-explains itself in a way that we see makes sense. Whether it makes sense at a larger level as you extrapolate outwards to like what's really happening on Mandalore is another question entirely. But it feels like it sits nicely within this episode as a way to get them from point A to point B while being able to have the... I mean, this is like the classic, we need to get a lift from the pirates to get across the, this part of the sea, and it means we can have a night together and have conversations and a political moment together with these groups of people. It is literally a plot vehicle. There you go. That's a good double entendre. But I liked it.
So before we get to the Godzilla, there are other pieces that happen. One of them that I had complained about before, which was whoever they have that does the not fight choreography, maybe action choreography. But when our group of Mandalorians sees the ship coming towards them and they're like, everyone take cover, you three flank left, they take like 5 steps to the left, and that was their flank. Like, I cannot tell you.
It's like Han's maneuver at the escape of the Death Star.
They drifted lazily to the left. These are supposed to be like maneuvers. They're supposed to be the best warriors in the galaxy, and they all clump together where they could be easily destroyed. There are so many things. None of them took to the skies, so they would have air superiority. There are so many things that whoever is choreographing this stuff could make these people feel more of a threat when it actually comes to the battles, because they act completely incompetent in so many of these situations until they need the rule of cool to step in, and then they're just suddenly awesome.
Can I reposit my previous argument about this, which is like, if you're in bulletproof armor at all times, you would kind of just futz your way through a lot. You would like I would show up to work half cut most of the time, like, because I'm not gonna die. I'm in a bulletproof suit.
Yeah, it's Superman. You would just take everything, because why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't disagree. It is goofy.
So the biggest thing I think on the sail barge, there were 2 things. There was the chess match with Post Vizsla and Pretty Boy, where it's turned into a knife fight for some reason.
Yeah. Isn't that how all of your chess matches end?
I mean, we're in America, dude. So
yeah, then you own like 50,000 knives.
Yeah. But I like I said before, I loved the idea that like Bo says, we cannot intervene because neither side is, 2 of the different factions are fighting, and neither side can step in, or it'll just cause this, civil war right there on the barge. So they just have to let them fight it out. But Grogu's not a part of either side, which really doesn't make sense, because he's definitely part of the Covert group.
But he's not. But he's a foundling. He's not been sworn in yet, because he's not old enough to take the vows, so he can't wear the helmet, so he's not a Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm. Look at you paying attention.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's all stuff they said before. So
the only thing that you were missing in there was an actually.
Well, actually. Damn, I was so unconfident with that. I feel what I did there is I pulled it together in my brain, and then I said it with conviction and hoped that no one would notice if it was wrong. But it's good to know that was okay. That's good.
So then the second really important thing that happened on that sail barge was they're sitting down to dinner at some point with the different factions, and they start talking about like how Mandalore fell in the first place, and they start talking about the Darksaber specifically, and Bo admits that she straight up gave the sword to Gideon in exchange for him promising not to blow up the planet and to keep her people free or whatever. And
she surrendered.
Yeah.
And I thought that was going to turn into a whole bigger deal, and it blew over. And I'm still debating as to whether they respected her more for telling the truth because they knew she would never willingly give up unless it was the best thing for her people, blah blah blah. But at the same time, they're like, Mandalorians don't give up, we never give up, and you betrayed us. Like, they're two equal sides to that conversation, but the conversation never happened. The scene just kind of ended.
Well, I shouldn't thought about that. I guess what they're trying to do is they're all living under the assumption that it got glassed because she refused to surrender because of her pride or whatever. And she's like, no, I did surrender, and then he did it anyway. So I think it's trying to I'm not sure what it's trying to do, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, because right after that was the scene when Din meets her off of the ship, and he pledges his everlasting loyalty to her because she's so awesome. And I couldn't help but think that it was part of that revelation that she gave that really finally sold him, or at least that's how they paint it when they do it A to B. Anyway, I was just curious about y'all's thoughts about that, because like I said, the story just kind of glassed over how important that conversation felt.
Ryan, I don't know if you have anything particular.
On the revelation and his talking to her afterwards,
yeah,
it's I don't know. I would have to go back and watch. I would have to go back and watch it again. At the moment, at the moment, I was trying to figure out the and I don't think maybe they leaned into this very much, where it was that kind of revelation. I feel like there's this sort of the Mandalorians have a Bushido code, or they're the kind of people that would have a Bushido code. We don't surrender, we fight to the death, etc. Yeah. And that they have this their part of their mythology now is that they got glassed because they didn't surrender. And she's saying, no, we got glassed after we surrendered. And I don't know. I was trying to think about what is the that. It feels like that should have created some conflict, yep, but didn't. But I think it's what it does is it shows that she has some self-doubt. I think we had talked about last week or the week before how I think it was Katie Sackhoff that said that she didn't want, as a character, Bo-Katan didn't want to be the leader anymore. That she had done that and she had failed her people. So I think this is her actually explaining how she had failed that. And then Mando coming in and then giving her the little pep talk and saying I'm gonna follow you till whatever.
Well, I think that's also a big part of monarchies. Isn't maybe the right word here, but it's kind of a true trope that the leaders who are the best leaders are the people who don't want to be leaders. And so you could maybe make the argument that now she is a better leader than she was previously when she ruled, because then she wanted it and now she doesn't. And
I distinctly recall, and I don't remember where this was, but I distinctly recall somebody here having a very particular issue with that kind of idea. And I don't remember what the context of that was.
If anyone's gonna have an issue, it would be David.
Yeah,
why
it was something. It was something to do with Star Wars, but I don't remember what it was. But you said, maybe it wasn't Star Wars, but it was something. We were talking about something, and you went off on this thing about how the idea of people that don't want to be the leaders will make the best leaders, and how dumb that idea is.
That does sound like something I would say. Yeah. I'm shuffling around my drawers, the drawers in my brain that are full of unnecessarily strong opinions. No, it wouldn't have been Solo. It would have been something. I mean, I think fundamentally the issue with the trope is it presumes that the rejection of the hero's journey is necessarily the same thing. Maybe we're talking about Lord of the Rings or something. Because Aragorn's a great example where the things that make him a good party leader in his D&D campaign, which is effectively what Fellowship of the Ring is, and the Lord of the Rings is, will make him a good party leader, don't necessarily make him a good politician and a good leader. And I think there is this presupposition and this is part of the mythology of capitalism, is there is this presupposition that so long as you don't want power then you will wield that power with better understanding and more compassion and more humility, and you'll be better at it, which is just like not true. People that set out to go, I want to change the world in this particular way, and they find political mechanisms to do that, whether that be conservative or liberal, again, rhetorically, not politically. Whether that be whatever spectrum you land on, people that are going out there and understand the mechanisms and the ways in which power and systems interact with each other are going to be better leaders than someone that says, well, I'm disinterested in this and it's been foisted upon me. I just think it's like a really disingenuous way to think about characters who take leadership roles. I'm far more interested in leaders who go, I want power for a reason, like it's a means to an end. That's where I think really interesting stories can develop from. I think it's quite easy to, I think it's just an easy trope to rely on at the end of the day, to sort of go, oh, he doesn't want to be a leader, and that's what makes him a good, like, you think about Luke Skywalker in the extended universe stuff, not necessarily the mainline stuff, but, you know, once after Return of the Jedi, he has a lot of trouble accepting the mantle of leadership. And then when he does and he makes it his priority, he's quite a good leader and quite a good Jedi mentor. And I think there is a tendency for us to forget that that's like a valuable, like, character trait and can be interesting and dynamic instead of just the lazy, like, oh, I don't want to be in charge. And I don't know. I can't remember my exact argument previously. I have to go back and refresh my memory. But
yeah, I'm trying to remember the context of it because, like, I don't.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think
Did we
Leia
talk about? Did we talk about stuff? Have we talked about? I mean, I know you guys have talked about stuff other than Star Wars. I don't remember if I joined you for anything on Star Wars related. Because we did Solo, we did Boba Fett, we did Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it may have just been a side piece of one of those. Anyway, back to the story, because now it's Godzilla time.
All right. So the problem that I have here, this is one of those things that really jumped out at me.
It jumped out at them too.
Yeah, it works on a couple different levels. All right. So the guy's like, have the guy like up on the iceberg right ahead or whatever. He's up on the crow's nest. And speaking of which, today was the day the Titanic sank 100-something years ago, 111 years ago. Yeah, that happened.
Why do you know that? What?
There's a YouTube channel that I found recently that's all about like ocean liners and stuff, and like they did a real-time sinking of the Titanic this morning on YouTube that I watched. It was pretty cool, but just skip over that.
No, don't skip it.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the conspiracy with that? Because that's one of my favorite ones. I adore the Titanic.
That's one of
conspiracy.
his least favorite ones. It's like that conspiracy is so dumb.
What conspiracy? Go on. We're here now. Go on.
That the keel of the Olympic was broken, and that one, the insurance fraud.
Yeah. So there was a second sister ship called the Olympic, I guess, and it was the one that sank instead of the Titanic, and they could tell this because the portholes that they found on the broken ship underwater that they claim is the Titanic were not the same portholes that you see in the pictures of it leaving. And then there's all this other evidence, and then there was this huge like insurance scheme that if the Titanic sank, they would get X amount, but if this other one sank and they claimed it was the Titanic, then anyway. So it was a whole conspiracy about the insurance payout for the ship sinking, and so they sank the other ship instead of the unsinkable ship. And anyway, it was fascinating. I researched that a couple years back.
All right, so he actually the YouTube guy that I watched just talked about that like the other day in passing. He was like, "This is really dumb because if you had an insurance scheme involving like these ships, you're like, oh, we need to repair it. And we'll put it in the dry dock, and oh no, somebody dropped the lantern and burned out the whole inside of the ship, and that's a plausible thing that happened in all the time in shipyards, and it would have been much easier than incurring all the liability of killing 1,500 people in the middle of the Atlantic." Anyway, what Boiled Carrots said right there, they didn't even try to maneuver out of the way. That is my big problem with this part right here, because you have the guy up there in the crow's nest, and he goes, "There's a big fucking thing down the road," and then they just keep going towards it. Am I misremembering that scene?
I need to watch it again. I thought it was like the head came out of the ice, whatever, like 100 feet away, and the tail came out like right underneath them, and that's what threw them out. Um, regardless, I think this goes back to what I was saying: is the whoever is doing the action choreography, I don't think is fantastic, because yes, it didn't feel right when I watched it, but I didn't really look again to figure out why. Because I love big monsters, and I was just like all about it at the time.
Well, it was
Of course
cool,
you like this.
but yeah, like my
it
issue is
cool.
what he said right there was it's the thing. They're like, hey, there's a big fucking thing down the road, and let's just keep going towards it. And that is how I remember that scene playing out. Like, they're not only did they like not stop or slow down and go, hey, what is that? This thing that is coming out of the ground down there, but like they make no attempt to avoid the situation.
It could be
Can
what
I
David
ask a
was.
question? Sorry, you go.
It could have been what you were talking about, and this is what you had wanted to see, was they're wearing invulnerable armor, so they're like, we don't care. We're just gonna keep going. It can't hurt us.
Just crash the whip. Who gives a shit? I don't. Why is this here?
Because
It's
they
like,
have to get
they have to
get
get in the cave.
underground.
Yeah.
They have to get in the cave.
They couldn't have just arrived.
For some
I
reason.
Sorry.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, it wasn't necessary to destroy their ship.
And an added point of tension might have been that the Empire, Moff Gideon could be like, "Hey, we've already blown up your steampunk sail barge, dickheads. There's no way out." Like, it would have given him an extra level of competence.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think this is definitely going to play into the mythosaur later on. I don't know how or why this is important to reveal the mythosaur later on, but
was it a mythosaur?
No, it wasn't. But the fact that two massive creatures now exist on this planet that were like, came up from the depths after the bombing or whatever, like, I think it's going to somehow play into the reveal of the mythosaur. And that was another reason for having it involved instead of just, like you said, bombing the barge and then they go underground or whatever. Although I think they wanted the surprise reveal of the stormtroopers to be more of a surprise. So if they bombed them with a TIE fighter and that's what forced them underground, then that's not the surprise that they wanted. So they use this.
I was just thinking sequencing-wise, you could have them arrive, go in, and then off-screen it gets bombed, and that becomes a piece of leverage that Moff has, where he's like, "Hey, you can't get out. I've destroyed your cool boat."
That would have worked a whole lot better, because then it would have been a point of tension for the audience that the characters don't share. And that's always kind of a neat thing when the audience is like, "Oh, y'all are in trouble, but you don't see it yet."
And then it adds tension to the next episode, because when they beat a hasty retreat to try and get away, what they don't know is that the barge is destroyed. And so that's your inciting incident for the next episode. Anyway, I'll stop rewriting Star Wars.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had a real quick thing. I might be misremembering how this played out, but the armor takes the wounded or whoever on the whatever you call the Bo-Katan ship. She takes there's a name for it. I forget what it is, but not really that important. But she takes the armor takes the wounded back to the fleet. I kept waiting for something to happen to the fleet. Nothing happened to the fleet, right?
I thought as soon as she came up out of the electrical clouds and could see again, that she was going to start getting all of these radio messages calling for help from the fleet, who were being attacked by Gideon's ships at that exact time. So now they have no retreat back into outer space. Why they didn't do that?
We did skip the part where the armor left, as Mike says. That's what I'm talking about. Like, there were a couple beats, it felt like, at where we saw the fleet, and then nothing happened. Mm-hmm. It felt weird to me.
Yeah.
Interesting. All I was going to say before is that I think it's notable, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense. I mean this literally descriptively. I think it's notable that some of the geography of this season, and I would say, like literal things moving through space and time, it's been hard for us to keep track of in a way that I didn't feel in the previous seasons. I don't know. It's just interesting that it's hard for us to normally when we watch something like this, we're like, oh yeah, they did this, and then they were here and they did this. This season, everything feels very nebulous and hard to pin down, and I don't know what that is, like where that's coming from. But I certainly struggled this episode. If you put a gun to my head and you were like, recount the plot, maybe just shoot me, because all I could tell you was like they went to
Mandalore.
Mandalore, and then Din Djarin got. And that's it.
That's
They
not
put
even what
Grogu in a
happened.
mech.
Or actually, no, he did. Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess
He
we're
got
both
kidnapped.
dead. I forgot about that.
Yeah. He's in
So
custody,
Kind of a
bro.
big plot point.
before we get to that, Mike and Carrot are talking about something that's kind of been flying around, that a theory about what the title means, because the title is The Spies, and we only know of one spy right now, which was Elliot Kane in the very first scene. So everyone is saying that the fact that the armorer got out at the exact right time to not be in the fight means that she was the other spy and she led them into a trap. I don't know how to get behind that theory.
I guess she could have shown
She wasn't
old
leading
mate how
them
to
in.
craft.
Well, yeah, but she wasn't leading them anywhere. She was just kind of like along for the ride the whole time. She didn't. I mean, she sort of influenced them to retake Mandalore.
Yeah, she did get Bo to go collect her people to bring everybody to Mandalore.
But she also volunteered to go with them to the planet. And if her
And then
entire...
left.
Say what?
And then left.
Well, yeah, but if her entire plan was to go there with them and then an excuse to leave, then what if she never got that excuse to leave? What if her ship was destroyed? Like, if the entire
Now you're
end
thinking about
goal...
it too much.
Well, okay, yeah.
No. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I don't buy into that. It based on, I can see where that is where somebody could make that argument of she isolated them on the planet and took their transportation, and now she's back with the fleet and can influence events there. Well, if that's part of the Empire's plan, I can see how somebody would make that argument. I'm just saying, or to me, that's where that's the end where of my devil's advocacy, because I don't think that's consistent with the actions of that character through the rest of the series. It doesn't make any sense that she would do that.
It's also allow me to play stuck up literary guy. It's also the uninteresting.
What do you mean play?
Okay. It's fine if I stop kidding. I was gonna say, well, he said play devil's advocate, so all right, give me this. No, I was gonna say it's also not what's interesting about her character. What's interesting about her character is the tension that she is able to navigate between these groups of people that have differing political ideologies, different religious beliefs, but the same history. And she represents a unification point. And that's why she's an interesting component in the story, is if she gets taken off the board, does this alliance still exist? And that's a really interesting point of tension at a thematic level. And it's going to create some really good opportunities for character drama. I just don't feel that if they make her the spy, I would have no problem with it. I think that's very funny. Yes, people have been saying they have horns on their helmets, hinting at them both being Maul sympathize. No one knows who Darth Maul is. We know this from Clone Wars. I guess no, Mandalorians do, because he took over for like 5 minutes. Oh, and I guess they're Death Watch, but oh no, this is sounding more plausible as I say it out loud. Okay, if this is true, I'm gonna hate it, but I just don't. I don't know that that's what's interesting about her as a character. Is maybe where I land holistically. I think she's far more interesting as a part of this political body and the threat her absence represents.
We also don't know enough about her for her to be interesting as a character, because she's just the NPC that you go to that spouts off exposition while you're getting your armor forged. You know?
Did Pre Vizsla have horn-shaped things on his helmet? Don't remember.
No, I don't think so. Let me check.
The other theory that I've heard on the spies is the dude who Bo-Katan defeated to take power back, that he's like, I'm gonna go get help, and he zips away.
Right.
And so
yeah.
So that's the other one that I've seen. It was like, oh well,
he zips out through the ceiling.
Yeah, it's like they let him go
yeah.
because he's the spy. That's the other
See, that makes way more sense, because someone had to teach the Empire. Someone had to teach Moff Gideon how to use the Beskar and whatnot. That would make way more sense, because he's already a dude we don't like. So he's easy to shelve and be like, he's the other spy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know that that's necessarily
The very good point
anything.
Mike makes there.
What's that? I just don't.
The flaw
the
why
flaw-
Gideon seems surprised that all the factions got together. That's true. If the armor was his inside man or woman or person, then yeah, he definitely would have known about that. Because she's the one who says, we need to bring everybody together.
She unites them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing with any Mandalorian. If Pretty Boy was a spy, then he could have sent a message to Gideon before they even got to the planet and being like, "Hey, we're coming, and all of us are here." But you have to.
Well, no, because he wasn't involved in saving Navarro. That's the Covert that does that.
But
true.
She says we're gonna go retake Mandalore. They go on their ship to Navarro to meet up with the Covert, and then they all go to Mandalore. So he knew for
No, but remember, so the shocking part to him is when he's like when they're like, I thought Navarro was undefended, and it's like, well, how did that happen? It's like, oh, Mandalorians. Like that's the shocking part of it to them. I don't think it was I don't remember. Did they say in the meeting? That's a question. Did he say in the meeting that the Mandalorians, that the Covert and the what is it, the Night Owls or whatever they are, that they've gotten together? Did they say that in the meeting?
I know at one point that Gideon specifically said which group, and I thought that it was explained to him in that same scene that it was both groups working together, but now I can't recall.
I think it's the fact that it's Bo-Katan, Kryze, and the Covert together. I think that's why he's surprised. He doesn't know about the Night Owls yet.
Yeah, that
sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds more right.
But I mean, talking about the spies, like it makes sense that somebody with them has to be a spy because the Imperials, I don't know what to call them, the First Order, I don't know what they are at this point.
The vague fascists.
The bad guys were ready for them. Unless they just like triggered a proximity alarm or something, because at like one point while they're walking through the cave, the stormtroopers just come jetpacking towards them. So either they like hit a proximity alarm or they were warned that they were coming.
Well, they know they're coming eventually, right? That's why they built this base on Mandalore, is so that they can get the mines, they can get the Beskar. Presumably, there's a reason that Moff Gideon set up here.
Well, okay, so that gets into what I had said in the chat that I was going to just rave about this time, and not in a good fashion. Like, this is what I wanted from the very beginning, where I could not understand why they kept talking about retaking Mandalore. If they had shown us this scene back in, like, Season 1, where we know that Gideon is mining the planet, and we know that the Empire has established a foothold on the planet to mine the planet, then we know from the beginning that there is something to retake. As of now, they were just fighting nuclear fallout, which you can't do.
It's true, you can't punch nuclear waste.
Well, you can, it just wouldn't...
It just doesn't get you very far.
So like, there were multiple things that they introduced here that would have made all of my complaints thus far have been invalid, because I keep saying, why are they saying this, or why are they doing this? And if they had established this earlier on, then it would have made way more sense. Like, they know there's this Imperial presence there. We have to defeat them in order to get our planet back.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think this falls this.
Sorry, I was slightly distracted. No. I'm still looking for this theory that we were supposed to read, but I missed part of what Darth said there.
So one of my biggest complaints, like at least this whole season, if not before that, was they keep talking about retaking Mandalore, right? But there is no one to retake Mandalore from, because it was abandoned due to the nuclear fallout. You can't retake a planet from nuclear fallout. You have to retake it from an enemy. So they needed to...
I never read anything into that beyond just we need to go back and reestablish it. Like that's
Yeah,
like retake, reclaim. I think you could substitute either word there, and that makes sense.
You could, but those definitely have those definitely have like battle oriented origins.
Different connotations. I agree, but I always understood it to mean like we need to go back.
yeah. I think it is a verbiage issue. But also reclaim sounds way cooler. I don't know why they didn't go with that. But also like that is kind of how nuclear waste works. We had to wait for a certain amount of time for the half-life to dissipate, and then you can't you can start to go back to places like Chernobyl and things like that. You can go to the outskirts of those places now in a way that you couldn't. But I agree. I think that it's one of these like I talk about this a lot, where there are like different words have absorbed different cultural connotations, whether or not that word actually has it. Right, we were talking about this last week, I think, with the Star Wars Celebration reveal stuff. Like, words like virtue signaling have inherited a bunch of extra textual meaning than what actually that word means and the phenomenon it describes. And so I think similarly, it's like one of those things of, it sounds like a military thing, but I guess now it can be because there's Empire there.
Is it like if they had initially used the word rebuild, we have to go rebuild Mandalore? I would never have had this discussion remotely. I would never have thought there were enemies on the planet if they had said we just have to go rebuild our home. That is what they probably meant the whole time when they were saying retake. Language is fascinating, isn't it? Just recontextualize the whole thing just with one stupid word.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's sometimes why one of my favorite things to do is use a word incorrectly on purpose to make it mean something different. And I think that in the context of something like this show, because people talk, particularly the Mandalorians and The Watch, they talk in particular kinds of, they have an affected register of like this mythic cult style of conversation. And I think sometimes one of the unintended consequences of that is moments like that for you, Darth, as a viewer, where you're like, yeah, for me, that confused me. Like, why would they say that? But then I think there's also a way in which these people talk and the tone they use that kind of engenders itself to vagueness and like it's also sort of poetic and mythical in its description, if that makes sense.
So Kate pointed out that we had missed in that opening scene with the probe droid, that's when Elliot Kane told Gideon, hey, the Mandalorians have teamed up and now they're working together.
Okay.
So I guess that's when that happened.
Okay. Interesting. Oh, right at the start. Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, so getting into the fight, all of the stormtroopers with their jetpacks are flying towards them, and I have the scene of Finn going, "They fly now?" That was going through my head.
I was thinking about that too.
I wasn't, because I don't remember anything from that film. I just know it's from that one.
They were, correct me if I'm wrong, they were super commandos, weren't they? Those are Mandalorians.
Yeah, I did not get that from what we saw in the show, but when I was like reading stuff about it, yeah, apparently they were supposed to be like somehow ex-Mandalorians who had joined the Empire or something like that. But
yeah, you'll get that a little bit later in Clone Wars.
Yeah, no, that's in Rebels. Is it? No. Yeah, that's Rebels.
Oh no, that is Rebels, you're right, yeah.
But like, how would you know that from this scene? Is it just like their face mask or something? Is
just like context clues. Like I don't think it's obvious. I don't think it matters.
I thought it was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it matters so much that it's Mandalorians that they're fighting. It's just they have jetpacks and much crappier versions of Beskar for some reason.
That's what I was going to say. That's why it matters. It's because if they're Mandalorians, they have Beskar and you can't kill them.
Yeah, but it's like Kara says, they were pretty lame. They were just like stormtroopers. Like they were. So one of the issues that has been brought up a lot recently is in regards to quote unquote the stakes, which is a term that I really don't like when people talk about of Star Wars. Is anytime the stormtroopers are involved, they're just fodder, And these guys aren't any better, even though they're supposed to be like, or even though I understood them to be Mandalorian, or Mandalorian traders.
Mike said that Gideon said they were clones.
What?
I missed that.
Jesus.
And that's something we didn't talk about, the intro scene when he walks past all of those flashy doors, and we see him walk past some clone tanks.
Yeah, but
When he
isn't that
said
the logic, man?
cloners, when he said cloners, I think he said the cloners have this, and the people and the Mandalorians have this, and I think he was saying how each group had their own thing going. That, if I
Yeah.
recall that,
Yeah, I got
that sentence correct. That
I got the
sentence
impression that
correct.
he was talking about something that hasn't happened yet, that they were building, that they had the armor in the Beskar, and they still needed to get the Force genetics down to combine with to make their super soldier. Like, not that
Yeah,
he was
and I
saying
think-
that.
Right.
And I think what the other thing that he said was the Death Troopers had had their armor redone with Beskar. Now the Death Troopers were not there because, or was it the Death Troopers?
Well, because he was the only one.
What are the guys at the end of season 2? Are those Those aren't Death Troopers. What are they?
Those are droids,
The
aren't they?
robots?
Yeah.
Yeah, he called the
Dark
dark
Troopers.
troopers.
Dark
Dark
Troopers,
troopers.
they
Because
were, yeah.
they were wearing all black, and Star
Yeah, and I
Wars is
think he
literal.
said like the Dark Troopers armor had been redone with Beskar.
Yeah, right.
Which makes them much more intimidating.
Yeah, they just look like plastic toy guys. They just look like toy guys. Like, I don't understand what's going. I don't know what this choice is here. Like, wouldn't it have been way more intimidating if it was a bunch of Mando style Beskar and they painted all their armor black and like they graffitied on the Empire symbols and stuff? Like, this could have been a sick
Black Mandos.
Like, Black Mando's intimidating, like, show us. And I don't know, like, I just think there's a missed opportunity here. Because what this ends up feeling like is they gave well, he says he made the ultimate Dark Trooper armor and he's the one wearing it. He's like, the best part about it is I'm wearing it. But yeah, this feels to me like an opportunity for show us what these Mandos could have if they joined up with him, right? This could have been that tactic of like, hey, you don't have to follow her, you can come with us if you want to. I don't know. This whole thing just, it feels goofy, and I there's no one thing to point to say why it does, but I think it's what Rye was saying. Like, the stakes feel unclear because it squints at what makes this a tense moment. Obviously, the numbers make it tense, and the Mandalorians are fighting back and putting some points on the board. Don't get me wrong. And then we get the trap where he basically shuts the door and he's going to capture Din, and he's got greater plans for Din, presumably, or Din's armor. Who knows? But this to me just feels. It feels like all the right pieces are here. The execution feels like it doesn't really know what it's trying to achieve, if that makes sense. There's no kind of clear intent.
I love Mike's point right there, that maybe their Beskar is crap because they don't know how to use it, because they're not Mandalorian. They haven't had that training.
It's probably not Beskar.
Yeah.
Because remember, like when we first meet Mando, he's got Mando armor, but it's not Beskar.
Yeah, and
well, this is the conversation we keep having. Is it's about the Beskar. It's the purity of the Beskar alloy and how it's forged. So yeah, Bo-Katan's right, where they're diluting it with other materials.
Yeah, and they also seem to have really established very early on, like, the valuableness and the rarity of pure Beskar. Like, what's one of the things that makes Mando so epic is he's rocking pure Beskar all over.
And that's something that at the very end of this fight, when the Pratorean Guard, the three of them come out and they defeat Post Vizsla and kill him. And instead of that, because this whole thing was supposed to be that Gideon is creating something that is better, that is the next generation, but then he is, I think, is the only one wearing the next generation armor at that point. So he
Correct.
should have been the one who kills Vizsla as proof of his superiority in the crafting of his armor.
Perplexing.
Yeah, why did they? Why did they? I mean, they very clearly have the scene at the beginning of, "I need 3 Praetorians for the end for the last scene of this episode."
Yeah.
Um, but why do they need the 3? Why did? Yeah, that's a good point. Why did they do that and
It
not have
was
him do it?
Yeah, I mean the implication was that only these people are good enough fighters in order to that can defeat a Mandalorian. That in my mind that was the implication, right? But he gives the pitch that what I am wearing is the best that exists and can beat anything. I'm going to run away now because I know I can't beat you.
Yeah, that was
Like,
it's true. He's like, "I've got the sickest drip now. Peace.
yeah.
I'm out."
Yo, have you seen this shit? I'm out. He really just swung by to say what's up.
Well, he didn't want to get it all
Um,
dirty. It was like brand new, you know?
Like, have you
Yeah,
seen
he's
how
like,
shiny this stuff is?
I just took it to the car wash, bro. I ain't trying to get it scuffed. I do wonder if this feels to me like, you know, and I hate to use this kind of phrase, but this feels like setup for something. Like, presumably the season finale, because he's all talking about, oh, we're going to make the perfect clone person who's got, you know, the warrior skills of the Mandos and the Force and the this and the that and the fifth thing. And I've perfected the armor, and I've, you know, this all feels like braggadocio setup. I don't know, like it's sort of, why does he do this? Because we needed to know, the audience needed to know that he's going to get away and there's going to be a big fight at the end. This is kind of how that feels to me. Again, it feels like it's for the audience instead of the story kind of doing its thing.
And for the overall story, because like bringing in the Praetorian Guard is like directly, this is leading us to episode 8 where we see them fighting Kylo and Rey. Like we are we are purposefully introducing stuff that may not make sense right now in this story, but in the overarching thing it'll eventually tie in. They just did it very artlessly and like literally I cannot tell you how much this bugged me. They were literally waiting off stage, and you could hear the director go, "Okay, enter stage left now." And I'm like, they just sat out there, watched all of their stormtrooper buddies get murdered, and then they walk out to the epic hero music.
That
Also-
that last part was. Do you want to go first on this, David?
All I was going to say is he's wearing a jetpack. He should have used it more. He could have just jetpacked up and shot them in the face.
They just would have been jumping and swinging with their sword.
So
Trying to catch his ankle.
so there's 2 things I want to talk about here. The first is we're up to post Vizsla's heroic death, right?
Yeah, we should
That's
say that
correct.
Mando gets dragged off. He gets captured and dragged off screen.
Well,
and,
if we need to say it,
um,
Gideon had a huge exposition moment there, like Mike was saying. He
his big
dropped a
speech
lot.
in praise of the villain. Yeah. Do you want to
Like it-
summarize it? For
Well, like I
us?
said,
'Cause
like I said before, this I don't really remember what he said, but I remember again. This is to me his best episode that character has had so far. Way more establishing his villain cred in this than he did in either season 1 or season 2. As far as like Gideon's.
Yeah, no, I was just scanning
I
my
don't.
brain.
It's just I don't remember what he said. So I mean, it wasn't that good as far as villains go. Like he wasn't like
no, but it was
he
like a
wasn't the Riddler.
general.
you know.
No, but I mean, it's he hit the trope, right? Which is like you need to do the speech and praise the villain just before you get to like the end of your 4th act, so that at your climax, you know, we know what he's about and we know what he's doing, and we got that nicely. And you know, it's the as I've said, it's the, you know, James Bond gets captured, you know, I expect you to die, Mr. Bond. It's that moment where he gets to tell us his philosophy and tell us his objective, and they do it, and it's fine.
It's one of the things that's quick aside or sidebar. That's one of the things that makes the Kingsman so good. It's like, this ain't that kind of movie, bro. It's like, you're
There's
gonna
a really good
monologue and
moment.
tell me your whole plan now? No.
In the reboot of the Doom game, one of the first things that happens is like your character wakes up and, you know, he turns to his screen and this voice comes on the screen and it's like, oh, you know, the demons are ready, and here's your plan, and Doom guy just grabs the screen and chucks it away, and it's like, it's at the exact moment when you're like, shut the fuck up, and he chucks it, you're like, oh, he did it. Yeah, I was thinking that. And it's
Character
such a
did
good
the
moment.
thing. Yeah.
And it happens constantly in the game where like anytime they try and do a video game trope, Doom guy is just like, no, I'm not having this. It's great. Yeah, more of that,
Right.
please.
Now,
So-
as much as I was hating on that fight, like I actually loved the fight itself, and the fact that whatever swords that these dudes are using easily pierces this dude's armor, and that's one that is one good thing that ties in with The Last Jedi, is that the efficiency that they show in this fight makes the fight in Episode 8 way better, because you know that it would have just tore through Kylo or Rey during any hit from any of those weapons. If it can go through armor this cleanly, it would have tore through their bears. They didn't have armor at all, so it would have just absolutely murdered them. So that is one thing that is, I think they did really well, was the way that they used those cool weapons. Although at the same time, now you're thinking, was he wearing Beskar? What are these things made out of that can pierce Beskar this easily? Is this some kind of new electromagnetic weapon or something? Anyway.
I just want it for the record that Darth just said that something good was about The Last Jedi. He said that out loud of his human mouth, and it's on recording forever.
I think to defend Darth here, like I'm pretty sure he was saying that the events of this better establish the events of that.
Yeah, it
I've
emboldens
never heard
it,
of
but that is the closest I've ever heard him say a positive thing about it, beyond the general malaise of that film. I just think it's notable. I'm not trying to get your Star Wars card cancelled. I'm just saying.
I actually have, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but I kind of want to make a video praising everything that I liked about The Last Jedi, because it would be such a challenge. I could do it.
I've thought about doing that too. Like
still
sit down and
think-
really look at, try to come up with something positive to say. Other than it looks
still
good.
think we should do that show. I still think we should do that show, because it will ruin both of your careers as Star Wars guys and only give me more credibility. So I'm down for it. Sorry, Rye, you were going to say something.
If you can expand my point of view on that, that is something that I would appreciate.
If you give me 3 months, I can get you to like that film.
Just 3 months.
I will give you a year, and it would and I think that would be difficult to achieve. Yeah. So the two things that I wanted to say about this this fight is the first thing was just as far as like stakes go, they have created a very big problem with the Beskar in the sense of like the stakes and the danger, because like you can take like all kinds of hits except when the plot needs you to be damaged. So it doesn't really. So that's the first thing, is that if you're rocking Beskar, you seem to be pretty much invulnerable to blasters or whatever, which is how this sort of plays out. Like he goes up, but there we go. He's got the right idea. I should grab me some of that too. Darth, make a quick point. I'm gonna go get some scotch.
Darth, say something interesting.
Yeah, because I have this is a bit of a thing, so I'm gonna need a big glass of scotch. I'll be back in a minute.
I don't know why my first instinct was to start quoting the Raven.
What?
Once upon a midnight dreary, we pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious.
Oh, that was
volume
your
of
first
forgotten lore.
instinct.
That was, yes.
When he said riff and make a point, you went to the Raven?
Yeah.
What?
Something's wrong.
Okay. Sure. That's a normal thing. That's a normal reaction on a Star Wars live stream, I think. Fucking hell.
Okay, what about because I'm deep in Clone Wars right now, which is also, I don't know how healthy it is, because like it's battle stuff after battle stuff, right? And so in my mind I'm like, we're at war, man. This is tense. Like there's gonna be another battle any second now. But yeah, the Zillo Beast, I know I was talking in the chat with y'all about that. I adored those.
Goofy.
Yes, it was goofy, but at the same time, like I love Godzilla movies going and tearing up a city. I wish they had like more stuff on Coruscant. I'm not sure really how they could have gone about it more. I know one thing that they didn't do is they gave the super implication that it was intelligent, and that's why it was going after Palpatine so hard, as like revenge. But they didn't actually address that in the show whatsoever.
Yeah, look, I think Clone Wars has this issue throughout, which is the few episodes where, so it's really good at introducing ideas where you're like, oh, I've always wanted Star Wars to talk about that. And then a lot of the time it gets this close to finding something to say about it, and then it flinches. And I think one of the best parts of Clone Wars is when Filoni doesn't flinch, and you have the characters have the conversations that you've always wanted them to have about certain things. Like in some of the lost material that was supposed to be the back half of season 6, I think, no, season 5, in like an animatic, you finally have Anakin and Obi-Wan. I can't say much more than that, but they have a conversation about a particular person. I don't want to spoil it for you. But they have a conversation about this person and how they feel about it, and it's the first time in the whole show where they actually just talk about it directly, and it's some of the best Star Wars stuff there is. And I think the Zillo Beast is like a great example of, if only that episode were 5 minutes longer and we got a scene where characters talked about that and like said it out loud and discussed what that means. Do you know what I mean? Like, the show is a lot of that, where you keep waiting for characters to say stuff and they just never do, because it's still a kid's show sometimes.
Something else that was interesting is in the episode that I just finished was a few after that, which was the clones training, and it's all about like the worst clone squad in training camp and how they have to get through their mission.
That's such a good arc.
And that's where we meet 99, who was like the Bad Batch clone, who was all decrepit and stuff. And then like multiple times in that one episode, they dropped the term Bad Batch. And I was like, did they build the whole Bad Batch show off of this one reference? Or were these writers so like ahead of the game that they put that reference in because they already had this plan for, we're going to do this whole Bad Batch thing years down the road, hopefully?
First thing. So, and that's the best part about it. This is my favorite type of storytelling, is someone going, that was a really interesting aside that we just threw away and walked away from. And someone goes, ooh, I have a story I could tell about that. And it's not, I have a story I could, it's not someone said, hey, you need to tell a story about the Bad Batch. It's someone going, I have an idea that I think could be really compelling. And that's kind of what Andor, not to keep blowing smoke up Andor's ass, but that's what Andor is someone going, oh, I think this could be really, really compelling. And then they happen to extrapolate from there and tell a story. We talked about this for the last few weeks, but like, yeah, that's the difference between making a product and making a story, I guess.
Rye, before we get into that, I think you wanted to talk about something.
Yes.
The fight.
The final fight. Yes. So, yeah. I think probably I'll talk about. Let me talk about the fight first, and then I will talk about the second point. So the first thing was, this whole sequence of events felt very contrived to me, because, and it was a lot of very much the killed by the plot kind of thing that you saw, like remember in Interstellar, when the guy doesn't get back to the ship. Yeah. But I mean, he gets back to the ship, but he just doesn't get in the ship, and then he dies because the plot needed him to.
The water planet.
Yeah. And so that's the situation of, he's killed by the plot. Like, he very easily could have gotten the ship, but the plot needed him dead, so he dies. But so in this situation, and this is where I started off talking about, like, they don't clearly establish the vulnerabilities of Beskar. Like, it is strong when it's convenient for it to be, and weak when it is not, depending on the needs of the plot. So it's very ambiguous, like, well, how strong this actually is, and then you run into trouble creating stakes there. By the way, I couldn't find scotch, so I have tequila. So when they're in that final fight, and Bo-Katan cuts the hole in the wall, and everybody gets away, and he's like heroically defending them. First of all, because the Beskar is so strong, he could just tank the hits and leave. That's the first thing. So that's point number one. But he doesn't do that, and he goes, "There's too many of them," and and I've got to fight them. And then he proceeds to kill all of them. And then, he either kills all of them, or I think some of them run away. I don't remember, but
he
one of the
pushes
other.
him off the
remaining.
cliff.
Yeah, he kills them all, and it's pretty fucking sick. He
Yeah.
goes to town.
But there's too many of them, and then I just killed them all. So why did everybody else run away? And then the Praetorians come out, and they kill him in a badass way. So my point there is, like, that whole part felt very contrived, and that led me into, like, I was thinking about when I drive home from work, there's no good radio stations in this town for whatever reason, so I have about 20 minutes there where I like think to myself about things, and
That's
and
very you. I
yeah.
love that. Yeah.
and I sort of like verbalize my thoughts, until I come up with something. So like this week I was thinking about like that scene and like a particular issue that Mando has, where I've said before that it feels like the earlier seasons or some of the stories in Mando should be stretched out. And that's one aspect of Mando that I've always felt was lacking. The other part of it is that I feel that the show is not as good as it could be, because in a lot of situations I feel like you can see the man behind the curtain. And I was thinking about how, and again, I wish my memory was better, because this came up a week or two ago where we were talking about a situation and I said the situation plays out exactly how you expect it to, but it's really satisfying. And I think the difference there is that occurs when the story is constructed in such a way that things fall into place, rather than things being pushed. And it's when things fall into place that you have the writer who's thought about where everything is on the board and where they all need to be and how to organically get them there, versus this, season 8 of Game of Thrones, where we need this stuff to happen, or in this particular scene where we need him to die. So this very artificial, contrived situation is developed, and you can see the scaffolding, you can see the structure, you can see the guy behind the curtain, and I feel that is broadly applicable to most of Mando. Is that there's a lot of situations that play out exactly how you expect them to, but not in that satisfying way because of contrivance.
My first thought when you were describing all of that was Return of the King, because like the last half of that movie, every plot beat that's about to happen, but when it happens, it's not like you're disappointed because you knew it was coming. It's like, yeah, I knew they were going to eventually throw the ring into the lava. I knew they were eventually going to defeat Sauron. I knew the armies were eventually. I knew Aragorn was eventually going to become king. All of these plot points were led up to through all of those movies, and it just, everything fell into place. Nothing was forced where it shouldn't have been. It was just all very naturally rolling where it's supposed to end up.
Yeah, there's a concept in storytelling that what happened is usually predictable. The trick is that how it happened needs to be surprising yet inevitable. So you have to be surprised and go, oh, okay, but it couldn't have gone any other way because of the other circumstances. And I think the couldn't have gone any other way is where Mando is struggling, where there's not enough tension in opposition to the plot and what the characters are trying to achieve, that when things happen, you don't go, oh man, that's what happened because blah 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 blah, and then they had to do this and do that, and they were forced into it. Here, because there's not enough of that extrinsic tension, and there's not enough potential for things to go differently, that when things happen, as you said, right, it just feels like someone moving a piece on a chessboard.
Like in this scene specifically, it feels like we need. This is we're very close to the end of the season. Like this is the darkest hour part of the arc, right? Of then to establish that we need somebody somebody we know to die, and I think that is all that it is like this is a structural plot mechanic, and that's why it had to happen. But to me, I don't know, like when he fell forward and like crunched down in like that heavy armor, like I was like he fell with the weight of a lead balloon. Like it was a thud to me. It just felt like there was no payoff to that death, I felt.
Yeah.
Versus I'm trying to think of there was some. I'm trying to think of a death in Andor that has that's both structural and payoff.
I mean, we can do that with I can do both in one if you want with Revenge of the Sith. One of my favorite scenes in Revenge of the Sith is where Anakin goes in and Mace Windu has Emperor Palpatine under guard, and he's saying we have to kill him, and that's a death with a huge payoff. But also that scene when Anakin walks in, every time I watch that film, there's a small part of my brain that goes, maybe this time he'll make a different choice, because it has there is such potentiality in the way that scene has been constructed that every time Hayden Christensen walks up and has that conflicted look on his face, I go, even though I've seen this film like 20 times, I go, maybe this time he'll make the right choice, and he never does. And that's the perfect combination of both.
Well, it's real quick to tap onto that. I'll let you go, Darth. I was trying to explain that to somebody about the Death Star trench. It was like when they're in there, maybe Han doesn't come this time. Like, it's
real tension.
Yes,
there's texture to it.
Yeah, and like I know Han's gonna come. I've only seen this movie or in that scene 1,000 times, but like maybe he doesn't come this time. Maybe that Titanic doesn't hit that iceberg this time. I
love that episode of Rick and Morty where it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, or Weathertop in Lord of the Rings when the hobbits are alone and the Nazgul are coming, and like maybe Aragorn doesn't turn up. Like that tension is real. Sorry, Darth, you were gonna say something. I got excited about good stories.
It's one of the really good. I love the novelization of Revenge of the Episode 3. My brain's getting sleepy. The novelization adds so much cool stuff, and one of the things is that maybe not every Jedi, but some Jedi have very specific force powers that are unique only to them. It's like a genetic mutation, whatever, however you want to think about it. And Mace's was called Shatterpoint. And it's like he could see the future, but he could only see where the future splinters. And so Anakin could make this decision or this decision, and it would lead to all of these other decisions. And I think the novel at that point was specifically all of the shatters coalesced into this one moment. And Mace could see that the entirety of every galactic decision came down to what Anakin decided right then at this moment in this room. And I love the beauty of that decision, and your description of it is like maybe he'll do something different, and that's what Mace was seeing, this visualization of all of that through the Force, which is just so cool to think about.
There's a similar moment in the what's the Quinlan Voss Dark Disciple, that novel where Quinlan Voss and who's the bald baddie from Clone Wars?
Asajj
Ventress. That book is like their kind of final arc, and there's a moment in that where it's like toward the very, very, very end of the book, and Asajj kisses Quinlan Voss. Spoilers, this is a romance novel. She kisses Quinlan Voss in this moment just before this big conflict, and she experiences a shatter point with the Force where she suddenly sees all of the potential futures in this moment, and it's the first time in her entire life that the Force has presented itself as a thing of possibility, and in that she sees beauty. For her, the Force has always been a weapon, a tool to be wielded. And in that moment, she experiences this serenity of the Shatterpoint, seeing into the future. And as that's happening, concurrently, Quinlan Voss, we don't find this out till later, because his Jedi special power is he he can access the memories of objects, so he can touch an object and see where it's been. And he touches, I think maybe he touches her lightsaber by accident, and he sees all of the things that it has done. And it's this beautiful mirror image between these two characters. It's absolutely phenomenal writing. Not a very good book, but has some great moments. But that reminded me of a very similar, that it's the potentiality, right? It's the example I always use is, I don't know if you guys remember in like high school physics, when you learn about potential energy, like in kinetics. So if you hold a ball on top of a slide and you hold it there, the force that you're exerting to keep it there is not represented equally by the force that ball can gain if you let go of it. They aren't equal in measure, and that's how stories have to work as well, is you have such a small amount to work with, and you have to present the impression of larger possibility than is obviously what's the case, because the story goes one way.
There was something else that Rye said that I thought was fascinating, and that was his description of Beskar, and sometimes it is impenetrable, and then other times you die immediately. And it made me realize that you have described the Force in exactly the same way, and I think Beskar is like a physical manifestation for non-Jedi users as to the Force, because sometimes it is undefeatable, sometimes the character forgets that they could even use it. And that comparison, I'm wondering if they're like doing it on purpose. Like, is Beskar just the Force for non-Force users? It works when they need it to work for the story, and they forget about it when they don't need it to work.
I think it's just bad writing.
Yeah,
well,
I think yeah. I mean, it depends on the genre of the story, I guess. Like, we've talked about that a lot this season, but yeah, I think it's just like bad writing, because like I've been banging on about, and I will say it again and then shut the fuck up and we can move on to a different point, which is Star Wars' biggest problem at the moment is that individual shows aren't picking between being a fantasy or a sci-fi, and they keep muddling and getting confused and conflicted within the same story. Like, if you think about how good Andor is, it's because it picks a lane. It's like, we are a spy thriller story. That's what we're here to do. If you look at Rogue One, it's a heist film. That's what we're here to do. It's an industrial heist film specifically. And Solo, God bless its soul and God rest it. Solo mostly does that before it, there's some stuff you can tell us by the other directors.
Well, do you remember when we talked about Solo? I said that like that one is a heist movie. Almost like in pretty much every scene, or every not every scene, but pretty much every sort of major plot event is a heist in that movie.
Yes,
from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's a Western heist story. It's great.
Yeah, but it feels so much different than Rogue One does, when it's kind of like essentially the same stuff happening. And like you said, that may just be the influence of the Lego guys who were trying to write it one way, and then they had Ron take it over from them.
That was Solo, right?
That was Soul. That's what Darth was talking about. Sorry. Yeah. The comma in my brain was in the wrong place. I had this. My brain did the same thing as Rye, but no, yeah, I see what you're saying. Mike has an interesting point, which is if Beskar is like steel, it can be tempered for different things. Yes, that's true. It can be tempered for different things. Again, is this a fantasy or a sci-fi story? If it's sci-fi, someone needs to say that out loud. If it's fantasy, then we shouldn't be confused. I don't know. You made the point last time, someone, about Mithril in Lord of the Rings, where it's like Mithril doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't need to. That's the equivalent of Beskar in Lord of the Rings. But the reason it gets away with it is when we find out that the elves, the necklaces that Celebrimbor makes for the elves that let them pour their immortality into the necklace to preserve themselves from Sauron's corruption. Wow, I'm a nerd. When that happens, no one questions why that's Mithril, because we already know it's a magic substance from the Fellowship of the Ring. So when that turns up in the Silmarillion, no one bats an eyelid and goes, well, we didn't know Mithril could do that, because it is already inherently magical. How does it work? No one knows. And it's not supposed to make sense. Like, there's a genre difference in how you approach and talk about, and how characters talk about it. People talk about Mithril like it's fucking like from a poetic era that's long since gone. People talk about Beskar like I can use it to fix up my truck. Like, yeah. It's tonally a very different experience. Now I'm yelling and I'm not sure why.
Sidebar. One of the best names in fiction ever.
What?
Celebrimbor.
He's such a badass too.
He's
such a badass.
He's a big character in the Mordor games, is he not?
He is. He
Celebrimbor.
is. They make him a bit of a fashy in that, which I'm not against. A lot of elves in Lord of the Rings are fashy. But yeah, it man, he's a cool dude. He's a really interesting character in the show as well. They do a really good job with keeping him kind of dynamic. Yeah, that show that I liked that no one else liked.
Yes, the chat is correct. Andor was a great show.
And it was so fucking good.
Have you seen that yet, Darth?
I keep trying to. I am at the scene.
Shame him, chat. Shame him.
You need to get 3 screens and have Rebels on one, Clone Wars on the other, and you can mute those and then just watch Andor on the middle one.
Well, see, I'm only watching like 5 minutes at a time of Andor because I just can't get into the tension of it. Maybe if I just drink enough, and then I'll be okay.
Okay, Andor is a show that what you should do is you should wait till it's like, I don't know how things are in your part of the world, but here it gets dark at about 6 p.m. at the moment. It's going to get dark a little bit earlier as sort of winter approaches. What you want to do is you wait, you sit on the balcony and you have a beer and you watch the sunset. And then when the sun sets and it's nice and dark outside, you go in and you pour yourself a glass of scotch and you watch Andor. You watch an episode of Andor, go and cook yourself a nice steak meal, right? You have another beer with that, you chill out, you vibe out, maybe you smoke a little something, maybe you don't, you go back, you watch another episode of Andor, and then you go to bed satisfied and full of good stories. And that's the perfect evening, okay? And if I can write you a prescription to a perfect evening, there you go. Take that to your pharmacy, cash it in, baby. You're welcome.
Well, it could be another situation of it's just not for him.
I think it's just a taste thing, yeah. I mean, I could have told you that for free, that it's not for you. Like, it's just a show that is...
The ironic thing is,
everybody that I've... go ahead.
I loved the first 2 episodes. Like, I remember getting through those and no problem, although I, again, had issues with some of the action choreography and the, like, escape chase. But aside from that, like, I was all about it at the very beginning, because it was like Star Wars, but in a way that we haven't really seen before, you know?
Yeah.
And like I got through some of the early stuff with the good lady that wears all white, the senator. I'm blanking on her name.
Holdo?
Me too.
No.
What is her name?
No,
the lady.
She leads the rebellion.
Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma. Jesus.
Good gracious.
We're all fired.
I've infected both of you.
Yeah.
My name poison.
I blame the tequila.
But yeah, the stuff with her, and she's like in this art gallery and she's talking with the dude and they like have to talk in code about what they're like. All of that stuff was awesome. And then it gets to the part where they're like trying to sneak in and steal the garrison's gold. And I'm like, this is so tense. I cannot get past like 5 minutes of watching at a time. And then I'm like turning it off and then turning it back on. I watched like the first 2 episodes back to back, but then it gets to this point of tension and I can't get past this point of tension.
Yeah, okay. Now that you've said it like that, I actually completely understand what you're saying. I don't know if you'll get. Well, no, I don't know if this is the same thing. So let me give you an example, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. This is usually when I'm rewatching a show that I already adore. You know, sometimes there are like things characters do that you find so rough to watch, like you just like, oh, you're making the wrong choice.
Yeah.
I often get to points like that in rewatching a show, and I'll just like pause the episode and like walk away from the TV, and then like 2 weeks later come back to it and think about hitting play, and then like, I don't know if I want to see it. Like, I sometimes have real trouble with that, but never on like a first viewing. But maybe that's just my personal neuroses. I don't know.
Do you remember when I was telling you about rewatching Breaking Bad and how like the Netflix, it was on Netflix and it has that like go forward 15 or 30 seconds or whatever, and I would just hit that whenever I got to stuff that I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I deal with that sort of situation.
You see, unfortunately, if I do that, they come into my apartment, they actually take my master's degree away, and they say you can't have a degree in literature if you don't suck it up, princess. And I'm just afraid that the university people will come and do that. So I have to steal through. I think it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely a show that isn't for everybody, to the point where it feels to me, and I kind of adore this as a maneuver. It feels to me that episodes 2, 3, 4, to an extent, are kind of the show being like, hey, if you're not fully in, we're not making it for you. Sorry. Like it does feel to me like that kind of. Some stories do this really well. I was just saying before we hit record, potentially, that I've been playing Pentiment, which is Josh Sawyer's new game. That's the original Fallout guys. So they did Fallout 1, 2, Fallout Tactics, Fallout New Vegas. Obsidian, best game studio on the planet. Their new game has a similar structural maneuver where you get to the end of Act 1, and a lot of people finished Act 1 and went, this isn't for me. And it's a clear maneuver where it feels like the story going, hey, we've set up our stakes and we've introduced you enough to the world, but if you didn't like this, chances are you're not going to like the rest of it. And there's something interesting in that. I don't think it's a conscious choice that a storyteller is making, but it does. There's a video on that I think that I want to write at some point, around what is that phenomenon and where does it show up and where doesn't it? And I think the simplest conclusion is like very focused stories that are about one thing and like have a unified vision are like that, right? The Batman is like that. A lot of people didn't like that film because if it doesn't get you, it's never gonna, like if the first 30 minutes don't get you, the rest of the film isn't, because it is so like trying to do one thing and do one thing really well.
It's interesting you brought that up, because in the first like 60 seconds of that movie, I was like, I think I hate this. I think I really hate this. And then I gave it a couple more minutes and I was like, oh, this is really dope. And because like the first like literal minute is just the dude watching with binoculars through the window, and it was like that was it. And at first I despised it, and then I was like, oh, it turned out pretty cool.
That grabbed me.
I was in
right away.
Like that was like my kind of the second that happened, I was like, oh, it's a noir, fuck yeah. Like I was so in.
I got there. I'm just a little slow.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I'm slowly reading through this. Yeah, that was the end of the episode. Pretty much. I don't remember. Bo uses the Darksaber to cut a hole so they could all escape while Homeboy's dying out front. I don't know where they're going because they don't have a ship and their land speeder was destroyed. So they're just going to be stuck down in the caves, I guess. Maybe.
Well, there are lots of TIE fighters down there.
Yeah, but they run in the opposite direction, so
they can.
Yeah, they can go back.
I guess
they could take the side.
I don't know why they left in the first place, because like Post Vizsla killed everybody.
Yeah, and even then she could have just used the sword to cut her way through the door to help him, so he didn't die by himself.
Cinema sins. Why didn't she cut through the door and save this? I'm kidding. Ding. No, it is. Yeah, it is confusing.
Vampire Kid as the Batman was the weakest part of the film. I concur in that I did not like any part of that where he was not in the mask, where he was not in the suit.
That's sort of. Oh, I hate being this guy, but isn't that the whole point? Anyway, we can't do this now. It's the end of the recording.
Yeah.
We can't have this.
Yes, we can, David.
I can't again make the argument that some things can be bad on purpose. Anyway, sorry. You go, Darth.
No, I was going to say that I don't want to get on a Batman tangent, but I also really want to get on a Batman tangent. Okay, so...
What do you mean bad on purpose? What was bad on
purpose? He's supposed to be weird and aloof and confusing and like
he's not Bruce Wayne, and that's what so many people are upset about, is that he's not the Bruce Wayne that everyone has already known. And whether this is supposed to evolve into the Bruce Wayne that we already know, or it's a complete recontextualization of the character, I guess we don't know at this point until they start making more films in this same world. But I don't think it's fair to say that we hate the character, or we hate the way the actor played the character, when it's a different character than what we're comparing him to.
So I will say that to me, that is the only the part of him, the part of him that I found objectionable when he's playing Bruce Wayne is not because it's the vampire guy. It's not because of that, because I never saw those movies, but it's because the character that he is playing, to me, felt cliched, and in the sense of like, I'm a miserable billionaire and I don't care about the money, etc. And that was the character he was playing in that movie, and that felt cliche to me.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah, I think that's a valid criticism.
I think that was one of the interesting things about Batman. At least I pull so much of my Batman stuff from the animated series because I grew up watching that show, and I think one of the big differences in why that character was so fascinating was because he had this super dark side, but Bruce Wayne was not that. He still enjoyed life and was happy and smiled and laughed and all of this stuff, and maybe you could argue that that was all a facade, but I don't think it was supposed to be. I think it was just supposed to be he split his life and he enjoyed life as Bruce Wayne, and he defended life as Batman. But this version...
That's why Mask of the Phantasm is such a good film. Because you see that not all of the Bruce Wayne is an act. Some of it is authentic. Like, he does have a love for life. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. I get it. It wasn't a concern for me. Not something I felt. I like the fact that he's like this grungy, like 90s kind of shithead who just like is apathetic and nihilistic, and I don't know, I'm interested to see if they do anything with that. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. Batman podcast coming soon.
Yeah.
We should talk about it eventually.
Before we wrap up, do you want to hear this theory?
Yeah, I've been reading it in pieces while we've been going.
Before we do, two things I want to get off my chest. First thing, and I'll repeat myself again, whatever the outcome is of the story, there is no grand conspiracy that Disney and Lucasfilm are trying to do anything. There's a bunch of people trying to do jobs and tell stories, with some kind of end goal of selling product, right? As we know, there's making money. There's no, they're not trying to make fans feel this, that, or the fifth thing. They're just trying to make money telling stories. They don't give a shit what people on the internet have to think about their stories. Thing two, Disney is the biggest company on the planet, and we should be... I like talking about this stuff, but we should also note, like, if you like this stuff, go and find independent art that also talks about this stuff. I haven't said that enough when we've been live streaming, but like, yeah, go and find, there are really, really talented people making stuff in the indie space that will hit all the same beats, and will help support, emerging and evolving artists in the independent space, which is becoming increasingly important as we move into the era of there being just two companies on the planet. So let's
chat GPT doing all the writing.
Yeah, and shitty AI sucking at writing. Okay, sorry, this has been my TED talk. Let's hear the theory.
All right, so the gist of this, if I understand this correctly, misdirection plays a key role in this season, affecting Bo-Katan's storyline. She dies, the identity of quote-unquote the spies, and the possible outcome of Din Djarin becoming Mandalore and Grogu taming the Mythosaur. So
I don't know if that's really misdirection, because I think that him leading everyone was like always subtext, and with Grogu taming the whatever Rancor earlier on, then it seems like a really strong lead that he's going to do that, or could do that again if necessary. Her dying could make sense if it was part of if she becomes a martyr that solidifies the unification of all of the different tribes. But I don't know if her death would make sense, or if it would work strong enough if that's not the case, because she's such a popular character. You don't kill off your popular ones unless you have a super strong reason to do it.
So I don't
understand what the... Can you repeat or rephrase? I'm still not following.
All right, so there's several different aspects to this. The first is that Bo-Katan dies. Okay. The second one is Din becomes Mandalore, or the ruler of Mandalore, and that Grogu tames the Mythosaur. So, what I was gonna say is that to me, I don't buy into the idea of Bo dying because there's like I'm going to pitch this to you, David, is the structurally you have character arcs or et cetera, and there are two different things of you build towards a character's death where the death is the payoff in the arc, or the character dies before they are able to complete their arc, and that you can do both of those things in such a way that it is satisfying in the sense of how stories are told, in that there's a tragedy that they're not able to complete their arc, or they are able to complete their arc, and then that is a fulfilling thing, even though they die at the end. And I don't see either of those situations applying to in a structural sense for Bo dying in this season. I don't think they've built towards that in any way. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think the challenge here. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that structurally it doesn't make any sense for them to kill her. That doesn't mean that they won't, because all of this is predicated on the assumption that they had a plan and that it's a well-written season. Let's just put a pin in that.
That's true. They could kill her and it could be shit.
Yeah. So I want to put a pin in this. I've just literally yesterday, my Sherlock book went off to get its test print. So I've been thinking about this stuff a lot with online theories and discourse and things like that. I want to be very clear. We're making the assumption here that A, it's well written and that the writers, are doing their best to do this thing. B, that the paratextual elements haven't altered their options as writers. So this is things like it being a franchise, Dave Filoni, making his big Mando Avengers film. We're assuming that these things aren't influencing the general structural apparatus at play of the season. All of that said, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to kill her, because her arc has to be, she's been, the previous season, she was looking for authenticity in her leadership role in order to consider taking back Mandalore. She hadn't bought into that yet. This season to me seems like her accepting where she is, which is the last remaining person who has a rightful claim to the throne of Mandalore, and working out what that means for her in the context of having worked with Din Djarin and the Watch, so like the bunch of cult weirdos, and then she meets the Mythosaur, and I think the work for her season is going to be resolving in herself, what does she think Mandalore as a culture means now? What kind of society would she like to build? And that, to me, at least, seems to be her arc.
That is where I am so confused after finally getting to those episodes in Clone Wars, is I do not understand Mandalorians anymore. Like, watching those episodes of Clone Wars broke me, because the entire planet of Mandalore wanted to be peaceful. So everything I knew about Mandalorians is false. Like, they were not warriors. They wanted to be peaceful and not fight anymore. The literal whole planet. So it's only these small groups that got sent out to the moons that have the armor and the blasters and the jetpacks. So I thought it was this entire warrior race, and no, it's.
Well, it's so Satine. Well,
Satine breaks from tradition. Right.
Yeah, this is the complicated thing about her leadership, is that she's the first queen to go, hey, maybe the whole warrior culture thing is the reason why we never get anything done. And so she breaks from the tradition of the Mandalorian way, and that's what makes her a target for Death Watch. Right? And so that's why it's confusing, because it fundamentally, she breaks against tradition because they are a warrior race. Exactly what you said. But the trick, the little, like, same thing, it's the same maneuver they do with the Jedi in the prequels. The little maneuver they do is there's enough believers of the old way that the tension in the system remains. And that's where you get the emergence of Death Watch and their contention with her rule as someone peaceful, because they're saying, well, they're literally saying, we're in a Star War right now. peace is not the way forward. We need to pick a side in the conflict between the Separatists and the Republic. And Satina's like, no, we should remain peaceful and ally ourselves with the Republic because they represent the closest thing to a version of pacifism that we have. And then you have Obi-Wan come in and say no. He functionally argues for Death Watch's methods, but with different outcomes.
And I don't understand how that ties in to, like, Bo-Katan says that she feels it's her fault that Mandalore fell because she was somehow instrumental in these different factions getting splintered off, but she was not the queen that made the entire planet peaceful. If the entire planet wasn't peaceful, it couldn't have been taken over by the Empire. Regardless of all of the different factions not being united, like, they didn't represent a majority of the population. If the majority of the population had guns, they wouldn't have been destroyed.
Okay, well, yes, but that's also the argument for, like, that's also the pro-gun argument that doesn't make any sense. I think the issue does. I'm not saying they're politically the same thing at all.
Well, real quick, as far as like the events go and her responsibility in them, her sister Satine is the one who's like, we should be pacifists, and she breaks with tradition. And Bo goes off with Pre-Vizsla and the Death Watch, and she is, through her association with Vizsla, instrumental in bringing Darth Maul to power.
Darth Maul, which is having a
and it's not. So that's one of the contentious points about her quote unquote redemption arc, is that we've talked before as far as redemption arcs go about the decision to turn from the path that they're on is very important in the redemption arc. She doesn't make that decision until she has no objection. This tequila's starting to hit me. She has no objection to the path, the way things are going, until it's Maul at the head of until Maul takes the Darksaber. Spoiler alert. And comes to power. So it's not until then that she's like, whoa, this is not the right thing that's happening here. There's a thing there's several more things here to this theory, but there's one particular part in regards to Bo becoming the leader of Mandalore. It's like, this would be a good payoff for Bo, in contrast to just simply giving her a shot at leadership again. This is regarding her death. That is a one-dimensional idea, and honestly is not an interesting character development for her to come to power, I guess. Din has sort of been put in this box of staying this quote-unquote wandering traveler per lots of pro-Bo theory, like that, pro-Bo theories, and I don't think that is a particularly interesting arc. In contrast, Din's growth from a wandering bounty hunter to a father to a leader would be far more interesting. So the thing about that is, I think we've said a couple times, and we've also gotten that response in some of the comments, that Din and Grogu have been sidelined this season, and that the Mandalorian in this particular season might be referring to Bo and not him, because he hasn't really had much to do, and he hasn't really had an arc at all this season. So in that respect, I agree with that it would be much more interesting for that to go to Din. But I again, structurally, I don't see that they've built towards that in any way.
Yeah,
because we talk about like characters' wants and needs and everything, and like that I haven't seen at all on Din's radar.
He doesn't need to do shit except keep doing what he's doing. Yeah, I mean, I guess he needs to find his purpose.
He's got Grogu.
Oh, that's right. I always forget.
He's a dad
because he can't talk.
And he's rescued Ellie, so
that's
all good there too.
Yeah, and so he's gonna have a good life with Ellie and Grogu. I don't disagree that I don't disagree that what they could do with Din could be boring, right? And I don't disagree that. I just don't think that bad choices motivate good choices like that in storytelling. I don't think that you sit down and you go, man, we really beefed Din's arc this season. Time to do a quick switch and have him become ruler of Mandalore. Like maybe I'm just cynical because I've been doing this for too long, but these guys know what they're doing to a large extent, and you have to wonder if the point maybe of Din's arc is he needs to work out how does he fit into, because obviously he's in service of this society at the moment. He's pledged his allegiance to Bo-Katan. Almost forgot her name. He's pledged his allegiance to her, and what does that mean when inevitably she makes a decision that is going to go against the super cult or threaten the super cult, or like where's the tension to be found in their characters? And I think her taking power again, having let Darth Maul go through to the Keeper, I think that's a really interesting perspective next season. Is what does a gun-shy Bo-Katan leading the Mandalorians look like in a time of genuine conflict with the Empire on the rise again? What does that look like when they need heavy leadership and she starts to endorse some of Satine's ideas of passivity and spiritualism? What does that look like? Because that's an interesting season of television to me. And then Din trying to fit in when all of his only value is being a heavy, right? He's the warrior class in the D&D campaign, right? His intelligence status 2.
Samurai.
His wisdom is 20, but he's got 0 intelligence and very little dexterity. He's dump statted strength is what he's done. What does that mean for him, and how does he fit into that? And at what point does he decide that things are breaking bad and he's gonna leave back to his life of bounty hunting? And so I think there are interesting stories and interesting tensions to be had. It's enticing to think of this as a long form switcheroo, like a long form red herring. I get the appeal of that. I structurally don't think it makes any sense.
I agree with everything that you've said. I just think it's much more likely that the story that we will get is Grogu gets Space Daddy and Space Mommy together, no crumbs.
That too, yeah. The romance between them, I think, is something that if I were writing this, they just have no chemistry.
No, they don't. It's not there. It's not there.
Yeah. But if I were writing this, I would have thought ahead. Oh, Jesus. I'm doing the well, actually, if I did it, I simply wouldn't have made this mistake. If I were going to do that, and they don't have to be romantic mommy and daddy, but they do structurally have to be mommy and daddy. That's what they're shooting for here. So I think if she were going to die, I think they are throwing the proverbial baby out with the bathwater of the really interesting political stuff they could do if she was the leader. And I mean, if you think about it, she's the leader and she's the mommy to a dude that uses the Force, a thing which Mandalorians fucking hate. They fucking hate the Jedi. That's an interesting piece of conflict. If she's trying to rebuild a society and she's got one of the mystic wizards that we all hate, like there's so much in here that I think is rich and textured for conflict that it would be a spurious choice to kill her for the shock value, I guess. Killing Grogu, on the other hand.
Oh, that is as monetarily, that's a deal breaker.
Ah, fuck yeah, he sells toys.
There was a really interesting thing that I heard some years back that I don't know that it's true, but it's plausible to me that there was a survey done. There was an insider survey from Disney on the Mandalorian, etc. And it was like, what the audiences wanted to see it. And it was there were some very interesting results to that, which part of me makes it some of the questions and some of the answers make me think that it makes it seem less plausible that this actually existed, but some of it did seem to track. Well, one of them was that what percentage of the audience wanted to see the Mandalorian tie into or lead to the sequels, and it was like 10 or 20%. It was very low. And that part of I heard this from that subreddit that Darth says I spend too much time in, which I used to. And So that like that part, I started to think like, I don't know that I believe that this is a real thing. But the part of it that did seem to me to make it more believable was when they were asking about like, this was before season 2 came out, and they were like, what happens if we split up Grogu? Not if he dies, but what if we split up Grogu and Din? And it was something like 99% of the people of respondents said they would not watch the show after that. So, and I think that
If
was
true. That makes sense.
Yeah, doesn't it? So I was like, I think because it feels sort of ham-fisted to put that reunion in the middle of Book of Boba Fett, doesn't it?
Oh, you think that was yeah, fuck, I hadn't thought about that.
Because like it felt like like if you think about it, it feels like either the show should have been entirely season 1 and season 2, and that's the journey and that's it, and we're done. And maybe again, going back to if they had done this correctly, of that leading into later Star Wars movies where we see them reunited some years down the road, and that would have been a huge payoff, which they didn't do. Instead of what we got, or where was I going with that? Or like that they really pigeonholed themselves into this. What's the trope, or is it lone wolf and cub?
Yeah,
I think it's lone wolf and cub.
It is, yeah. There's another one though.
It's the same thing as Last of Us, exact same thing. But that they really pigeonholed them into that, like they managed to catch fire with that, but then that's what the show is now. It's him and Grogu. It's not Mando going through the galaxy and having adventures of the week, etc. It's it's the story of him, the two of them together.
Which, come on, guys, kill the kid. You cowards.
Eventually they have to.
No doubt that would be emotional, but that would also be the end of the show. So one of there's more stuff to talk about with this theory, but something that Mike said in the chat, which is something that I've been thinking about, is what did he say? What's going to happen with the Coruscant plotline? Is it just going to be over because we got 2 episodes and that's it? Like, I was thinking about that. Like, was the whole point of that just to put her in a position where she would be able to communicate like important information and to wrap up the Doctor? Like, because it feels unnecessary to me to do all of that.
Can I make a cold shot on that one? Because I think I know. Because I think
do it. I'm gonna get more tequila.
Okay, because I think I understand the mind of Dave Filoni. I think I'm in the Filoni zone. I think the Filoniverse. I think the Filoniverse is doing the same thing that the Clone Wars did for Revenge of the Sith, which is it is cleaning up all of the detritus and loose ends of the sequel trilogy. I think ultimately what Filoni is doing is trying to fix in the same way that he tried to fix the prequels. He's trying to fix the sequel trilogy by way of The Mandalorian. And the more I watch, but by the Mandoverse, I guess, writ large, the more of it I watch, the more I'm convinced by these little maneuvers like, oh, here's the First Order, and here's this, and then here's the Empire, and here's, and Thrawn's coming back. It feels like him taking a lot of the extended universe material, trying to tie it all together, and trying to fix those loose. The fact that Praetorian Guards show up, that's a maneuver that you don't get unless he's trying to precede some stuff for Episode 8. Last Jedi. Was this close to saying Return of the Sith, but that's not it. Like you can kind of feel some of that here in a way that I think is really present in Clone Wars. That only, I mean, it was already in season 1, but I mean, I'm only feeling it grow increasingly a larger part of the story, and it's not necessarily that it's leading in to the sequel trilogy, because I think we've discussed it before, everyone would hate that, but it's doing a lot of the same maneuvers, which is it's patching up the extrinsic world building, like the paratexture world building, the larger kind of apparatus that surrounds it, in the hopes of bolstering its potential success within the larger universe, right? Because one of the things that they want to do is they want to tell these stories after the sequel trilogy, and so Filoni is the perfect man to bring in to bridge those gaps and to try and kind of mediate out some of the worst aspects of those prequels, of those sequels, which is what he did for the prequels. And so it would not surprise me if that was if they said, you can keep doing this because we trust you and you care about the Star Wars stuff and we want you to keep maneuvering and working through that.
One of the things, or one of the criticisms of the sequels, which I sign on for, or not sign on for, but I concur with, is the idea that, and I've talked about this in some of my videos, right? Is the world building, the setup of where are the pieces on the board and who cares about what, and like Rey's motivations, because like, does she know who the First Order is, and what is the First Order to Jakku, and has she even seen them before, and what is the New Republic to her? Why does she care about them? Does she even know who they are? Like that, like all of the world building, etc., that you don't get in The Force Awakens. And there was this criticism that I heard that talked about the state of the galaxy at the beginning of The Force Awakens, and how because where we are at the beginning of The Force Awakens doesn't really track from where we ended in Return of the Jedi. It sounded like some really interesting stuff happened between those things, and maybe we should have seen that trilogy first. And that's again why I say that they made a mistake by going right to the movies. Like, they should have started here in the TV series, because and again, going back to what I was saying at the beginning when I was talking about that book, Bloodline, is the politics there are very interesting to me, in how you would have the rise of the First Order and people motivated and in positions of power to make that happen, not necessarily for evil ends or not to bring Palpatine back or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then in the context of that story, and that makes sense, and it's very interesting how that's done. And I could totally see Filoni doing that with some of the world building between this and then Ahsoka and then the movie that he's supposed to make, etc., to connect A to B, because we didn't have that initially. Like, where we start in The Force Awakens doesn't really make sense without a whole lot of stuff happening off screen.
The biggest problem with that is that Kylo is the spark that sets everything off, and I don't really see them making a prequel that covers Luke's Jedi Academy, which is what we really need.
No, we're getting that with the Rey movie now. Remember? We're getting the Jedi Academy movie with Rey.
Hey boys, is Grogu going to be old enough by the time the Rey movie takes place chronologically to help her build the school?
Yeah. Ooh, is he going to be the new Yoda? Is that what they're doing?
Is he going to be the one who actually
Star Wars?
Yeah, maybe. Like, he's going to be the one who's actually like, hey, Rey, I actually know how to use the Force.
That's totally what they're going to do, isn't it? Oh my gosh.
I fucking hate myself. Oh shit. Oh, that's so funny.
You know what's really disappointing in that is that I think that would get people to turn out. If you had Grogu in those previews, I think people would turn out for that.
That's fuck. I did want to address what you said, Darth, before I said that heinous thing, which is kind of my point with the Filoni thing. Is like, I think the clever thing he does with the Clone Wars show, and kind of by necessity because of some of the lines in Revenge of the Sith, like when Anakin and Grievous meet for the first time in that film. There's so many moments in Clone Wars where they almost meet and they never can. I think the thing that Filoni is really good at is filling in the texture of the blanks without putting his finger on the thing and being like, and here's the thing you missed. Because personally, I would love a Clone Wars animation style show about Luke in the interim years. I want pre-Academy. I want Luke just bebopping around doing adventures in space and stuff. But that's a really rich well. I think if you touch, this is kind of what you guys were saying, I think at the start of the season even, where if you get too close to the sequels, people get squeamish. And so I think as long as it sets up like what Rye was talking about, like the big political stuff and the big structural things and the state of the universe with characters we care about, I think it could engender people to being more friendly about the idea of a story after the sequels. You can kind of feel Filoni and Favreau and Kennedy kind of like having these conversations, and you can sort of feel how it all kind of could work together. It probably won't, but it has that potential, I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
I guess
one
we've
of
already
my
seen Grogu flip. So
that's one of my hot takes about the sequels that people usually yell at me over, is that they could fix them. It is possible that they could do a Clone Wars style thing where they fill in, because it's not that necessarily the films themselves are so confusing, it's that the backstory that would make them make sense doesn't exist because the writers never took the time to write that backstory and that world building and that character development and all that. But if you give us enough stories like Mando and Boba and all of this, and eventually you have to do a Luke's Jedi Academy story in some fashion, and then we see young Kylo and see him start to turn, then the sequels will make sense. It doesn't mean that we have to like what they did, which is the part that people can't get past. Like, people hate what they did with Luke, and if we understand it, we will hate it less. We still might not like that direction, but having it written well is such a big step into making a decision that you don't like being something that you could accept.
That's such a good way of putting it. It's making something you don't like into something you can accept. That's such a perfect summary of what this minute, like, if you think about Revenge of the Sith and Clone Wars, that moment I was alluding to earlier with Mace Windu, where Hayden Christensen comes up and he has to make his decision with the full context of having watched Clone Wars, obviously in the absence of the final episode. When that moment happens, it creates such a larger potential space for what Anakin could do, because you've seen him make the wrong choice and the right choice in so many different contexts that suddenly it becomes a moment of real tension and potential. Whereas I think sometimes, previously for some viewers, it's absurd that he would do that. Like, it's on face ridiculous that he turns so quickly. With the fullness of the context of the show, it feels a lot more compelling. And so I wonder if, the Filoni verse, or whatever the fuck people are calling it, the Mando verse, I wonder if that is going to try and do something similar. Was Luke's temple, when he's in the 2 episodes of Mando and Boba Fett, is that where he's starting the Jedi Academy, or is that a different thing?
That's it.
That's where he's starting the Jedi Academy. Like, that's pretty much, like, I want to say it's very shot for shot for the temple that gets or his academy that gets destroyed in the sequels.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I believe it was the very first video that I made was the question of, could a Clone Wars style series? I think my video was the what was it?
Was it
could a Clone Wars type series improve the sequels, or fix the? I think I said fix the sequels, and if so, where would you put it? And I've thought about that a lot since there, and I think where did I forget what I said, where I would put it. But yeah, it's I don't think, now that I've thought about it, like some more, like I don't think you can ever quote unquote fix the sequels. I don't think that is possible. Partly because of my thoughts on The Last Jedi, which I will give you all the time in the world to try to amend my thoughts on that. And I don't see it happening, as skilled as you are. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do that will enhance or improve it. That you can that could be very additive and very much in the world building department. Like I said, like between the OT and the sequels, there's a lot of interesting stuff that could happen there to set up the world the way that it is. But like I think the major thing that I said in that video is that, to me, like, the post-sequel era is the most interesting time period that Star Wars has ever had, just because of the sheer amount of chaos that would exist in that time frame. And that was the more than anything else about the Rey movie is where I was most disappointed, because it didn't sound like they were going that direction. It sounded like they were just going to make everything hunky dory.
Yeah, it's like you said last week. The story's uninteresting when things are going well.
So I don't know what they do there.
I don't know if you remember from it was one of, I think it was that 2-part video I did on the foundation that the sequels were built on and how it was so bad. That's where all the problems stemmed from. But I actually broke down like all of the plot line that was missed between episode 6 and episode 7, and like it was amazing how much there was packed into that missing gap. That's just a big question mark. Like, you know, Han and Leia got married. They had a kid. They built the New Republic. Luke built his Jedi Temple. The kid grew up and went and joined the Jedi Temple. And then like 20 other like major life, you know, hallmarks happened for this group of people and for the galaxy at large. And all of that stuff is just a big question mark when it comes to the sequels. Like, what happened? No one knows. They never wrote the backstory. Which part of that I found out in my research for the Kylo video, that the original writer, who now I'm blanking on his name, but they had one guy originally writing this, and he spent like 18 months writing the script.
Wasn't it Kasdan?
No, because Kasdan and Abrams were the two who Arndt. I think it was Arndt who was supposed to write it the first time, and he got canned because he worked on it for like 18 months and then still said that he needed another like 2 years or something stupid to finish it. And then they brought in Abrams and Kasdan to finish it, and they only worked on that script for like 6 weeks before filming or pre-production like actually started. Like, they hadn't done casting. They couldn't even tell you who was going to, what the characters' names were. 6 weeks of work to do all of this stuff. So, like, once I read that, I was like, that explains everything. Like, they literally had no backstory because they barely had time to write the story proper. So, obviously, nothing in this thing makes sense because there's nothing holding it up. The foundation, they didn't have time to write the foundation.
Yeah, I want to make a distinction between, it's probably my final like academically interesting thought, is I think there is a distinction between, because what you said is exactly right. The issue with the prequels is not that a great deal of time took place. It's that it was sufficient time for things to change, but it wasn't so large a time for it to be unimportant what happened in it. If it had been 200 years, it kind of wouldn't matter what happened in the specific strokes. It would matter more broadly what happened, right? It's in this weird, it kind of puts itself in this weird spot where if you think about something that does this really compellingly, think about Blade Runner 2049, where Blade Runner 2049, the difference between the original film and then 2049 coming out and what all has occurred in the world feels so well conceived and thought out that the specifics that you need to know, you get told or you get shown, and everything else just becomes like world building malaise, right? You see how the technology's evolved. You understand how, the androids have changed, how blade running has changed, things like that. The sequels have the problem of they're close enough to the original trilogy that, and they use some of the same characters, which I think is a big mistake, but that's a whole different conversation. They use some of the original characters directly and then go, oh yeah, what happened in that interim? Oh, we'll figure it out as we go. That's exactly what you said, which is if you're going to have that short amount of time, and if it was shorter, so if it was like 5 years, then it would matter a great deal, the specifics. If it was longer, so say 40, 50 years, the specifics would be less important. But they managed to hit the sweet spot of where it both matters politically writ large what happened in that time, but also the specifics of the characters and their involvement in it. And none of that feels none of that feels thought out until Filoni has come in and started to pull at different threads and start to put that together. And so they kind of have the worst of both worlds.
Can you imagine having that job, Filoni coming in and they're like, "Hey, fix this."
To expand a little bit on what you were saying there, and you might have been saying this, but this tequila is pretty good. I think so. I might have said this somewhere else before, but like you have, you don't have a story. You don't have a story in the interim. You don't have a story when things are going well. So you don't really have a story when things are static. So that like if when we have the end of Return of the Jedi and they all lived happily ever after, you wouldn't have a story until things started to not go well, until things started to not be working out well for them. So if you extrapolate from the end of Return of the Jedi, Leia goes and works with Mon Mothma to oversee the New Republic. Han does whatever Han does with, him and Leia live happily ever after, and he's a respected space general now or something like that. And Luke goes off and rebuilds the Jedi. And so if you started from there and then advanced 30 years, where would you expect to be? You would say, Han and Leia are getting along fine, and maybe they have a family, maybe they don't. And the Republic's, maybe the Republic is starting to have trouble, but like between that interim period, nothing really happened. And then Luke has his Jedi school up and running. So I guess what I'm saying there is, I don't know if that made sense, but basically,
it does.
You have the interim period where everything's just going fine, and you don't have a story, and we don't jump back in until things start to not be fine. But instead, what we get is a bunch of stuff happened, and we don't get to see it. And so one of the terms that I really hate when people use it, because I don't think they use it correctly all the time, is they say mental gymnastics. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's, when it comes to storytelling, you have to make a lot of inferences. Or if you're doing good world building, in my opinion, you have this sort of fog that you keep talking about, where you don't explain how the goblins do whatever they do, and you leave, like you give me enough of the story that I need to know for the story to keep moving forward, without telling me everything about the goblin society. And I can just sort of extrapolate that, and then if that becomes relevant to the story, maybe you've thought about it, or you write it in such a way that it makes sense, that I go, oh yeah, okay. If I'd thought about it in the meantime, I would have come to the same place as you. But mental gymnastics to me is when, like, I have to write the story that you're not telling me. And that's kind of what you have to do between the OT and the sequels right now. And I think what you're saying is that, Filoni is the one who's coming in, who's actually filling in the blanks of this 30-year period.
Yeah.
And I think that will, as much as I hate to say it, I think that would enhance the sequels. I don't think it fixes the sequels, but it would enhance them.
It's funny that the prequels suffer from that same thing that you pointed out, because like a lot of people, myself included, were saying, well, we would love to see a trilogy that takes place before Episode 1 in the High Republic, or whatever you want to call that time period. But it's the same problem that you just described. There's no war going on. There's no Sith. They haven't seen a Sith in 1,000 years because they kept to themselves. So there's no Sith to fight, unless they meet a Sith.
That's why it makes it so interesting, because the conflict would have to be different.
I think that's what they should have done with the sequels. Yeah, the way they approached them was to make the
absolutely,
the conflict totally different. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Rian Johnson was right.
No, he wasn't. Get out.
No, just that fundamentally, like, there are other stories to tell that aren't about the Sith and the Jedi. That could be really. I mean, Andor is that. Right. Like.
Yeah. There's no Force at all in Andor. Spoiler alert.
Exactly. Like, and that's a really interesting place to have a story happening, is like in the place. And I realize that's not what Star Wars fans want to see, but that's where I think there is really rich. And that's why, like, the first little bits of Mando are so interesting, is it's just a dude bebopping around bounty hunting. And like, that's something we haven't really seen before in like the, on screen. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a difference between the story demanding you invent collateral material to make things make sense versus
also what
stories with deliberate silence. There's an exercise that we used to make all of our students do in first year, which is when you what you would do is you would find a book you like. We'd pick a book, it doesn't really matter. And you'd find a point in the book where there was a silence. So where let's say it cuts from a chapter and then it skips a beat and then we don't know what happened between them, or there's something that gets left out on purpose. And we get the assignment is you need to write out in the author's voice what happened during that period. And it's an exercise designed to teach you as a writer, when is it, like, it's supposed to call attention to the fact that, like, you're not supposed to know and there's a reason for that. The example I always give is in, I want to say it's The Outsider, maybe. I think so. They escape town and they hole up in this church outside of town. And one of the older kids says to Ponyboy, hey, we need to cut your hair and dye it so that the cops don't know who you are, and the other gangs don't know who you are. And we don't see we don't see them go into town, steal the hair dye, steal food and supplies, and come back. We just cut, and then it's him dyeing his hair, because the thing that matters is the emotional. For context, he's called Ponyboy because he has beautiful blonde hair, and that's his name in the gang. And then they shave it and dye it. And it's the emotion of that moment that matters, huh?
I hate the name so much. Ponyboy and Soda Pop. God.
Anyway, but that's the book that I use when I explain the whole point of it, which is like, the reason you don't get that sequence is it's not relevant to the story. That's not where the tension in that moment is. The tension in that moment is him losing some part of his identity in order to kind of get by. And that's where like the difference between the mental gymnastics and providing world building lies, is like, have they correctly understood for the story they're telling, or correctly guesstimated for the story they're telling, where those silences should be and where they shouldn't be. It's a difficult thing indeed.
You know, an interesting comparison scene, because I just got through it and I'm still talking about it and raving about it, was in The Last of Us when Joel is stabbed and he like falls off the horse, and so he's laying there bleeding out on the ground, and Ellie's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? You have to wake up and tell me what to do. Then the next episode starts and she has him in the basement of a house, and part of my brain was doing these mental gymnastics, like, how did she get this full-grown dude back up on the horse? How did she get him into the house, down the basement, and all of this stuff without like totally killing him and having him bleed out all over the place? And then the other part of me was just like, I don't really care. It was a time jump that made sense to where they were taking everything. So I don't know, that was just an interesting comparison that popped up when you were talking about the time skips and stuff.
No, it's a good example, and the game does the same maneuver where it just skips that part because it doesn't matter. Like, that's not where the tension is for that. And sometimes that logistical stuff can matter, but I just don't think that Star Wars is always that type of story. Andor definitely is. It just, to me, like, yeah, there is a missing component of the sequels, and yeah, I think to just circle back and put a pin in it, like, it would make sense that this is the maneuver they're going for, and if you were going to bring in anyone to do that, you'd get the guy that did it well the first time, which is Filoni. It seems like a no-brainer to me. Which financially,
I've said this multiple times in like comments and stuff. I don't know that we've ever talked about it here, about how Filoni is like getting all of the cred, but Favreau is writing so much of these shows, much.
Yeah.
And
he's basically like full-time this now. He doesn't really do Marvel anymore.
I would love to know behind the scenes, like, what is going on and how much each gentleman is bringing to the table. Whether Filoni is like, because I'm kind of wondering if Filoni is like the ideas guy, and then Favreau's like the writer. You know,
what I wanna know is how much flack or interference he's getting from the story group, because I have to feel that because he's involved Filoni in so much, that maybe that shields him to some extent, or maybe also because the show is like the tent pole of Disney Plus, that maybe that shields him some as well, because there have been so many things. There have been so many projects that Lucasfilm has announced that have just never materialized, and a lot of that I've read is because of the director's like, well, I want to do this, and the story group goes, well, you can't do that. And then, and I think that was something involved in the sequels where I think it was The Last Jedi where like the story group was like excluded from actually like having any input. But it was yeah, and I think when the story it was whoever worked on like TFA first, or it was one of the other movies. I don't remember which one it was, but it was somebody came away from the story group going, these guys don't. They have ideas, but they don't have a story. Like they don't, and their essential role is to just say, well, you can't do that in Star Wars, or like this character wasn't here, or blah blah blah, and like the lore and everything like that, and like the, but that as a story group they don't have any stories, but they just get in the way of stories happening.
Yeah, they're like a fact checking.
Yeah, I never thought they were anything more than that fact checking. I've never heard that they actually had any authority when it came to anything. I know for a fact that I heard that in regards to The Last Jedi, that when they were told the story and they got the details and everything, that they were shocked when fans didn't like it. But that also doesn't indicate how involved they were in the writing or in the signing off of it. So I've always thought they were more of a figurehead than an actual, but I really don't have much evidence to base that claim off of.
I never really thought about it. Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
there's more to Louis Gaunt 13's theory. But I mean, like again, largely from the outset, I don't. I mean, maybe it might happen, but I don't see where the story is right now leading to that. Like, so some of the other stuff here. The seemingly random appearance of a large monster emerging from the ground might foreshadow the Mythosaur's surprise appearance at the end of the season. I absolutely think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's a surprise at all. I think that's just guaranteed. Yeah, it's just guaranteed.
But where his theory differs, or their theory differs, is that Grogu could potentially tame the Mythosaur, symbolizing a significant moment in his character arc. I don't see that happening. This doesn't mean that he will be Mandalore now, as he can't speak the Creed. Din will serve as Mandalore until he's old enough. Din also might have the Darksaber, which will give him more clout to be Mandalore today. I don't see any of that happening. I think it's going to be. I think that's Bo's path.
And one significant thing is that the original Mandalore was not, as far as I remember, was not a Force user. So when he tamed the original beast, it was a symbol of human strength and human ingenuity, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. So,
or plot twist, maybe he was a Force user.
Fair.
because you think about it. Think about it. Here's a wild theory for you. This is purely tequila. This is purely tequila talking now. But
if we're just making shit up, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting Grogu in the Rey movie. I'm gonna do some stuff too. So like,
I'm not making. Listen,
did it. You did. That's gonna be your fault. Like 5 years from now,
I didn't mean to manifest it, you guys.
5 years from now, when that movie may or may not get made, I'm gonna be like, this is David's fault. He did this.
Is that how I finally get canceled? I put the Grogu in the Rey film.
So no, I don't think Bo will be the focus moving forward. I think it's just I think Pedro Pascal wasn't available this season because of The Last of Us, so they had to make it about something else. So he couldn't be the center of attention. Also, well, no, that's a different thing. But what was I going to say? So what's her name? Bo. I completely forget her name now. In the episode where they go to the living waters, like she's going on about, she's being the tour guide and being like, poo-pooing the whole thing and just like, whatever, I had to do this for my dad and we went through the motions and blah, but it's all bullshit and everything. And he tamed the Mythosaur. And then she's reading from the historical plaque, remember? And then she dives in the water and then she sees an actual Mythosaur and she's the one who's like really shook by the whole experience, not him, because he's already a believer. And he didn't see any of it. So yeah, she's the one who's really shook by the whole Mythosaur thing. So maybe because we're so far removed from events, like maybe there is that potential that he did use the Force to tame the Mythosaur. Now, all that being said, I don't think any of that's relevant or necessary to any sort of the arcs that we see in this season, because Bo is not a Force user. So it would have to be all skill or will or whatever it does, whatever it takes to tame a mythosaur. But correct me if I'm wrong, David, like, you don't put a mythosaur in the beginning of the season and then never bring it up again.
Yeah, you don't put a mythosaur on the shelf and not fire it, okay? Like, the mythosaur will be relevant. Yeah, in some way. I mean, even the fact that she's seen one or knows of one, that could be simply enough. I think... Yeah, look, this is difficult because I don't want to... Trying to think of a way to phrase this. A lot of this stuff could make logical sense. It would make very little thematic, emotional, or structural sense. And I think that's like one of the biggest difficulties. As I've been doing my Sherlock book, that's one of the biggest difficulties with fan theories versus writing stories, is because you have this capacity to process and assess narrative with a level of detachment and a level of usually some kind of emotional investment, right? Like you want Star Wars to be X kind of way. It can be challenging when crafting a theory to go, okay, if you were going to guess what's going to happen at the end of the season, realistically, Bo-Katan will become the leader of Mandalore with some kind of complication. Maybe her, Night Watch the Watch will stay, but maybe the other guys have some dissent. There'll be some kind of complication. There has to be some setup for Thrawn. The mythosaur's got to get brought back up. And Din in some way has to be instrumental in her promotion to leadership in a way that complicates that leadership in the future. That is like what they're doing structurally. Grogu's also going to be there in a mech, presumably. And what all they do with the armorer and Moff Gideon and shit like that, I guess we'll see. But I mean, like, those are the things that for sure is, if they were going to do the story they've been telling.
So, side note, there is nothing I think I want more in this timeline than for them to do a Black Sun side trilogy and bring Darth Maul back. I want that so badly.
Can't happen.
Wait for David to get back, because we talked so long that his batteries died in his earbuds.
I think I'm back, maybe.
Oh, you mean a Black Sun trilogy set in the prequel time? Well, Well, you can't do it now because he's dead.
Oh,
like he's dead.
Yeah, Obi-Wan kills him.
Like the Force doesn't even save him this time. He's gone. He's dead.
This was. Yeah, all this was after. I still want it. I want more Maul.
No. What I want is the rest of the Solo movies, which will never get made, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because I think we had said at the time that Kira is one of the more interesting characters out of that movie. And where does she go?
You're talking
I
about
would
her
pay
or
good
him?
money for a Kira trilogy.
Oh, Kira, yeah.
Yeah. She's a really interesting character to me. He's dead, unfortunately. They could bring him back, I guess. I don't know.
All right, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what Lewis is saying in the chat. I think it is entirely possible for Bo to tame the Mythosaur, to become Mandalore, and then she is just a side character. There's no, if she can become Mandalore and Mando and Grogu can go off and do their own thing. That's entirely possible, and we can maybe go have Adventures of the Week next season, or go into some entirely new conflict. But all of that is possible with Bo being taking power as Mandalore. And honestly, like the biggest issue with all of this is that they have had nothing to do this season, and it's been all about Bo. And so I think you do need to resolve Bo's thing, make her leader of Mandalore, and then have Mando go off and do whatever it is that he's going to do. Like maybe he goes back to Navarro and becomes a local sheriff or whatever, or something. Mm-hmm. But does something more interesting than hanging out on Mandalore.
Yeah, that's kind of why I think the way that she comes to power has to drive a wedge between them in some way. Because that if I would if I were writing this, that would be my maneuver here, is like, how do I put them at odds with each other in a way that forces him to be subservient but kind of pissed off, like kind of not happy about that.
Well, that's
know.
I mean, that is I was going back to Last Kingdom. There's a scene there where like his the main character, his lover, is like a princess who really should be the queen of this territory, but the people all elect. The people are like, well, we need a guy, and so they pick him, and he's like, all right, well, you made me the king, so I'm going to resign and I'm going to give it to her. But they also can't have this situation of like it's this weird, complicated situation of you have this love dynamic between the two of them, but also the power dynamic of he's getting offered the position that she wants and she really should get, and then not being able to have both of those things resolved in a what do you call, in a conflict-free way. I don't know what words I'm looking for there. Do you know what I mean? Where
Yeah, I mean that
you have those two different things at play, and they're resolved in such a way that he does the right thing for her, but that means that they can't be together.
Yeah, I mean, like fundamentally, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, is like that is how you would maneuver this. I feel is how do you put them in a position where they have to resolve this in a way that will contain friction for their characters and their place in the story and each other's lives, right? Like one of the obvious things that is a challenge for this story so far is that Din is I've said this before, he's a very literal guy. He's kind of a big dummy. And part of that means that he literalizes a lot of his understanding of the universe, the rules of his cult. And that's where the conflict between him and Bo exists. Like that's the Venn diagram of where they're interesting as companions, friends, frenemies, whatever you want to call it. That's where it's really interesting to me, because she is able to be pragmatic, especially now that she's gone from the tough kind of persona that we saw in Clone Wars and is now a lot more kind of like, you can see that guilt, you can see that complexity to her in her approach to all of this. And like we said, that the unwillingness or the reservation in taking control again, given how much he failed last time. That's really interesting tension between them, because Din is a man of conviction. He's a character of conviction, and she is a character trying to find out what conviction means for her moving forward. And that's really cool tension that I would love to see next season. Or, as you say, they have a falling out at the end of this one. They go their separate ways. We get another whole season of him bebopping about. And then in the big Mandoverse Avengers film, they put their differences aside and, come in and save the day.
Question. Would it be more interesting or most interesting to, because here it goes back to the Mando should be stretched thing. We only have one episode left, right? I believe.
Is that right?
I think that was 7. I believe there's only 8.
What season are we on now?
3.
3. List. Let me see.
Yeah, this was 7 we were talking about.
I believe
there's episode 8 is the last. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have. Here's the thing. Is when I was saying, like, could this be more interesting? Is that they fail to resolve this and take back Mandalore this season, and then we get a whole another season of Moff Gideon next season, and maybe a more present Mando.
Well, that's what I was gonna say about, like, we're only talking about these characters short term, and we need to be thinking about this is the leading up to the Thrawn arc. So how is Bo-Katan going to tie in with the Ahsoka show? How is she going to tie in with the one after that, which will probably be where Thrawn comes in and actually does his stuff? And would they kill her off now, as opposed to having one of the strongest characters around for their Thanos big movie event? I would think they would want to keep Bo-Katan, and if they're going to kill her off, they would kill her off in the big Thanos snap or whatever he does that kills off the main characters.
Oh. Huh. That's a really good point. That is genuinely Darth, that's what I would do. If I had to kill Bo-Katan, if someone put a gun to my head and said, you need to put a gun to Bo-Katan's head, that's how I'd kill her. I would have her be the Phil Coulson of my Mando Avengers film.
Yep.
I would have her be what unites them. Or I'd kill Grogu, because that kid got to go. At this point, I'm covering my ass just for
Never gonna happen.
for the sequel film. I don't want it to turn up.
So-
I don't want to own that responsibility.
Lewis, you may be entirely right that Bo-Katan dies next episode. It's entirely possible. I don't see it happening. I would be very surprised and possibly interested if it does. Only thing I would advise you is don't be married to any preconceptions about what is going to happen. That usually leads to disappointment.
Yeah, it's you'll have noticed part of the way we've been talking about this is stories are text created phenomenologically in time and space. Star Wars is not a thing. Star Wars is a thing people make. And so whatever happens, the important thing is they are going to write and tell the story they're going to tell, and we will talk about it the same time next week. Is that...
And maybe we will be eating crow and saying that, wow, that Lewis guy had it right all the time.
If this is true, then I need to get on a phone call with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and work out what the fuck is going on. Because somebody better stop those boys making more Star Wars.
Now, again, Lewis, like what you say right there, I quit Star Wars if this doesn't pan out this way. That's what I mean. Don't be married to an idea of what's going to happen. Leave yourself open to be surprised and have your expectations subverted in a satisfying way.
Yeah.
Or just go watch Andor again.
Yeah, or just do that.
It's like, it's not that he's wrong in the reasons that killing her now would make sense, but for the overall story, she could be utilized so much better. So it's like, if you're wrong about this, it's okay. It's not like your argument didn't make sense. It's not like there wasn't some logic there. But if they do that, and if they kill her now, I think we would all agree that that is not the best use of her character. Long term.
When I was talking about subverting expectations, the best writing is one where it's like, not only did we didn't get what we were expecting, but we got something better, and that's how you subvert expectations. You get more, not less. Yeah,
and to connect that through, the thing we've been talking about this whole evening is it's about, I guess morning for me, but you know how time works. It's about like when something hits and it hits well, you have that feeling, you're surprised and excited, and the more you reflect on it, the more you go, oh, if only I had seen it coming. If only I had pulled on the right clues. If only I had, because obviously it couldn't have happened any other way. Like, and that's the feeling you want, is you want that texture to the reveal. And one of the things that like rug pulls and big switcheroos can never get right is they don't feel textured, they feel cheap. And the way that you build up a death, right, is something like The Two Towers. I mean, the film does a very good job. The book does a phenomenal job as well. Where Aragorn dies, spoilers. Well, he doesn't. We think he dies. And you think he's dead for like a good portion of that story. Do they transplant that into... No, they don't. That is still Two Towers. Yeah. But he dies for a good portion of that story. And his death changes the entire plan, essentially, of how they're going to defend Helm's Deep. And when he comes back, it's this moment of, you're like, well, obviously they weren't going to kill him off, but like the way he comes back and the energy he comes back with, and the way that he talks to it's not Arwen, it's the fuck, I can't remember names. Maybe it is Arwen. I can't remember. Whoever the chick is that fancies him. And when he comes back, and she thinks it's going to be this romantic reunion, and it just isn't. It's brilliant. It's just fantastic. Like, and
it was more romantic between him and Legolas than it was between those two.
I'd pay a lot of money to see those handsome boys kiss.
One thing I want to be clear about, Lewis, there is a difference between the Mandalore and the Mandalorian, and that's the same thing.
It's true. And the Mandalorian is our new Mandalore lore-based podcast where we discuss all things Mandalorian with an Lore. Because lore. Have I used that joke this season? I think I have, but I'm fine. It's fine.
Maybe you haven't. It's not ringing a bell. You know what was,
Okay,
you
well
know what was
then-
so interesting when you're talking about subverting expectations, and it
I
wasn't.
don't. I'm still reading Lewis's comments. I don't think they're replacing Din for political reasons. I think they replaced Din for logistical reasons, that he wasn't available this season. And as far as him taking his mask off, there's, I think it was Eckhart's ladder or X Clips, one of the people associated with that group. They were talking about today, I think it was today, how the thing about him taking his mask off is a pay thing, because if he doesn't take his mask off, then they only pay him as a voice actor. Whereas if he takes his mask off, then they pay him as an actor. And that was a sticking point for him.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
If you think about it, he takes his mask off for very briefly at the end of season 1. And then he takes his mask off a couple times in season 2. We haven't seen him take his mask off this season, but I mean, I would expect that we will next episode. If that is correct and it's a pay thing.
Interesting.
I'd heard that he was fighting really hard, maybe season 1, for them to have him with his mask off because he wasn't getting any like name recognition for it. But then The Last of Us blew up and whatever else he was working on, so maybe he didn't care anymore.
Can I be completely honest? Pedro Pascal was super famous before this, in like TV.
He was
Like, he's
doing
a
well.
TV
He was in Narcos
He was in Narcos for like
and
4
Game of
seasons,
Thrones.
like Game of Thrones. Like he was doing fine. This dude does not need Star Wars. He just needed a paycheck.
Who was he in
and this
Game
is
of
a cool
Thrones?
role.
He
He's
was
the prince
Oberon.
from across the sea. Oberon. He gets his head.
He
gouged by the mountain.
He gets his head pushed in by the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He dies pretty. He was very skinny back then, so he does look a little different. But yeah.
Well, it's also testament to his character or his acting ability that.
Different guy.
It's a different character, so I didn't recognize the actor. That's
Well,
Who
no,
is
it's weird. Like every time, like I'm watching Narcos and I'm seeing like, what's his name, Agent Pena or Javier Pena, and I'm watching like Game of Thrones and it's Oberon. They're not the same person.
And Joel is a different guy than Mando because Mando is a big himbo. Yeah, he does have a lot of range. Oh, one final thing just on that is, I said this last week. I've pretty much said this every week we've done this. Star Wars is deeply not progressive, despite what everyone says, and there is nothing political about them writing what's a pretty interesting female character. There, I said it again. Okay, it's not progressive in any complicated sense of the word. It's in fact. It's a level of safe that is almost like conservative. Anyway, whatever. I said it again. Yes, I agree though. I think Pedro Pascal doing fine. Clearly a pay thing. Also, The Last of Us is like the biggest show on the planet right now. He kind of picked the right horse to bet on there, I feel. Right? Like,
Yeah.
the fact that we were talking about this last week, the fact that normie friends of mine have watched it is crazy to me. The fact that like my boss watched it is crazy to me. Like just normal people know who Joel is. And know what clickers are. Like, that's insane to me.
And probably an even bigger thing is the fact that they took a video game and made a successful movie, quote unquote, about it. It's like, that is, they can't do that. It's like no one can make a good video game to movie adaptation for some stupid reason. Even making a book to movie adaptation is like impossible for some stupid reason. It's written for you. All you have to do is take what's written and put it on the screen, and they can't do it. It frustrates me to no end.
It's hard.
All right, there's some other stuff that Lewis wants to read here. So, they are a business. Lucasfilm and Disney are businesses. They, by their nature, serve their stakeholders. The idea that they would make such massive changes to the show just to make a political statement is ridiculous. They are still trying to make Star Wars more appealing, but don't want to piss off their core fan base. They can have their cake and eat it too. Din becoming Mandalore makes the core fans happy and still appeals to the new demographics that are key to Lucasfilm's strategy, seemingly. The controversy...
Hang on.
I don't.
That next bit, isn't this did I make this argument last week that that's the opposite of what they would be doing?
Yeah, they would be making the woman the one that is the Mandalore. That's what Disney would be shooting for.
Yeah, but again, like I said before, you can have her be the Mandalore or the ruler of Mandalore, and that doesn't. I mean, she's not the main character. I mean, it felt like it this season again. I think logistically because he wasn't really available. But like I don't agree with this idea that he's being replaced as the Mandalorian. I mean, maybe for this season, but not going forward. The controversy in general this season has definitely increased streaming traffic of the show. I don't understand what controversy that is. What controversy?
Sure. I don't know.
This also serves their stakeholders. Season 3, episode 3 was at that point the lowest rated in IMDb. That doesn't mean people didn't watch it. Numbers for this episode were higher than the season 2 premiere. Something.
I don't know if that makes sense, because you wouldn't know that the show was bad before. You wouldn't know if the episode was bad before you watched it. So the streaming traffic couldn't be higher as a result of it being bad.
I don't agree that being Mandalore is key to Din's arc.
Also, Mike just said the most like truth bomb thing of all time, which is they're accidentally progressive and intentionally regressive. Yeah. Get him, Mike. Get him, Mike. Bro, that's funny. Yeah, I think it's I think just because the show is called The Mandalorian has very little to do with Din's relationship to becoming the Mandalore or running. He has like, I philosophically have like the divide between the way I think about how people write stories and that idea is like, it's such a large divide that I can't quite approach it. Also, yeah, streaming numbers are irrelevant. Like, they're here to sell toys. Like, it's, if you look at the split of like how all this stuff works, like they just need to maintain subscriptions, sell more toys. As long as they keep making stuff, they'll do that. I'm not sure what that controversy is, but yeah, certainly it's one. Streaming's a weird thing in that way, where it's like there isn't really like a, you know, like when a film comes out, at least you can box office, you can check how much they spent, how much they made. Streaming's weird, where it's like, what is the nebulous value? Is it that you're in the news?
And it's to maintain what already exists. It's to maintain revenue. That's the confusing thing. I was thinking about that this week. And it's like, how are they making enough money to warrant what they're putting into these shows? Because it would have cost them the same amount to sit there and do nothing, or they would have earned the same amount if they had sat there and done nothing. Because people are still going to stay subscribed to Disney Plus for all of their other content, so it doesn't matter if they make new shows. So unless those new shows are selling merch, like you're saying, how are they earning money off of those new shows?
I mean, toys. I don't know. It's a big business, right? Also, I super good question. I fundamentally don't understand. I fundamentally don't understand how. I guess like you have to have new content to give people a reason to come back, or they'll cancel. I don't know what the. I have no idea.
Well, that was one other part of that survey was the amount of people that subscribe to Disney Plus only for Mando, and that was part of the impetus for them to have like year-round Star Wars shows. Oh. Is that there? Yeah, a big part of the initial Disney Plus audience was Mando only. Like Mando was over and people unsubscribed, like
really?
In the millions. Yeah.
That is shocking, because like I would think Marvel would be way bigger than Star Wars as far as that goes.
Lewis, I don't think you understand what I'm saying. I think Bo becomes Mandalore, and that's the end of her relevance to the show. She's like just becomes a strict side character that maybe we check in with every now and then, and that's it. And then we go back to the weekly adventures of Mando and Grogu.
Yeah, and then eventually she gets pulled in with her new planet of people, and then they help
she's
fight
relevant
Thrawn
to
later on.
She's relevant to Ahsoka. Yeah.
I could see that. I do want to address something really quickly, which is this idea of like the imagined public, this idea of like many will, people aren't. I don't know. Like if you read Anderson's book, which is I read at uni, which is Imagined Communities, I think. Anderson talks about this idea of there's this way in which media creates imagined communities where, and he talks specifically about print, where it's very easy to say, well, people are saying, because you can select a subset of the media audience and extrapolate a larger imagined voice for that audience. It's kind of the same political maneuver that you see a lot with, if this person gets elected, many people will. And it's like, well, you can't really substantiate that because the public doesn't work like that. The public is a series of individuals with a series of tools and mechanisms by which they can exert their will. And Anderson's point in that book is about they become really good mechanisms for actors to smuggle in ideas into like a broader imagined self, right? It's the idea of like, oh, well, if, people won't watch it if it's woke, for example. We've talked about wokeness before a little bit on this show, and like it doesn't exist as a concept. But it's this way in which it's a rhetorical device that divests you of responsibility of owning the idea. So if I say, I think this will happen, it's a lot easier to substantiate me saying, I think this will happen. If I say, and if they don't, the imagined public will. And the second that you give it the particular language that Anderson does, and whether you agree with his ideas of nationalism and stuff, your mileage is going to vary. But it's one of those things of people don't really work like that. Like, people are going to watch it or not watch it based on their individual circumstance in life and a bunch of things. And yes, there are decisions they could make, like, for example, putting Rey in as the new person in the sequel film, that we all kind of went, oh, that seems bad. It seems like a bad idea. But at the same time, there are people, most people aren't going to give a shit because they go, oh yeah, that's Star Warsy, I'll go see it. Like, the imagined public is generally apathetic to decisions like this, and they will stick around if the story is good and entertaining and interesting, and they will leave if it isn't. And there is a version of reality where they make another season of The Mandalorian where Bo-Katan is the protagonist, and it's really damn good. That is possible. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I tend to agree with Rye. I think that they'll probably, like, move her off center stage and have Din go do some other mission that probably relates to Thrawn or Ahsoka or something. But I just wanted to address that concept because I see it used a lot, and this is part of the research from the Sherlock book. I see that used a lot in the fan space to give theories or ideas or outcomes credibility where, like, it's okay for it to just be its own thing. It's okay to be like, if they do this, I'll stop watching, which I think is fine. I think that's a fine attitude to have. It's not my attitude. If they do this, I'm not interested in the show anymore. That's fine. But this conjuration of the imagined public is like one of these things that has persisted since the 80s from print media, that I think has only grown more substantial through social media, and the way in which you can kind of atomize concepts into sub-communities, right? You guys talk a lot about the different Star Wars sides on the Reddits and stuff, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
ones that all hate each other, yeah.
They all hate each other, and it's because they're all saying, well, but if Star Wars did this, then people wouldn't. And then they say, well, but if they do this, then people would. It's like, well, what people? Like you're just kind of conjuring
the normies,
these.
yeah.
Because the normies don't give a fuck. If it's a good story, that's what The Last of Us taught us, because the game is phenomenal. Great story in the game, heartbreaking story in the game, heartbreaking here. It's a great story. They made some good adaptation choices, and people fucking love it, and they will turn up for a next season, right? They made some changes in that, which are very woke, okay? Ooh, Pedro Pascal isn't a white guy. Ooh, his daughter isn't white. Ooh, like, they made woke choice, and no one gave a shit, because the story was good, because wokeness doesn't exist. Like it's all this kind of, like, fucking tesseractive bullshit. And I'm just like, I've got to a point, like, where I've been doing this for so many years now, like almost a decade, where if they nail it, like, if they kill Bo-Katan next week, I will wear the egg on my face, and we will say structurally it didn't make sense. They probably made a bad decision here. But I think the larger point I'm trying to drive at is there is a way to think about this stuff, which is what Rye was saying before, where if they make choices you disagree with, you can be disappointed without it feeling like they betrayed the fans, which is a term that I hear a lot, bandied around a lot. A story can't do that. Like, a story is a thing created by people in time and space. That's like phenomenologically not possible. It's an invented concept by people that stake an aspect of personality in media, that they then back with an imagined public. You can't betray fans in the story. Like, it's just not phenomenologically possible, in just like with the way that stories work. And that's the end of my rant. It's clearly this Sherlock stuff has been in my brain during this drafting process, and I just can't stop thinking about it.
My last word as far as next predictions on next week goes. My prediction is that if Bo is going to die, structurally, we will know that in the first 10 minutes if she's going to die. Structurally, that is my prediction. If we don't know that and she dies out of the blue, then yeah. So tune in next week, and we will talk about how Lewis was right and we were all wrong.
Yeah, and I'll eat crow finally.
Same Darth time, same Darth channel.
Are we going to plan to be 4 hours again next week?
Hopefully
No.
not.
Probably not, because I won't yell for 2 hours of it. So.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, appreciate
for
it.
the spirited discussion, Lewis.
Yes.
We'll see if you're right
All right.
next week.
See y'all.
Bye.